Chapter 4900. Although I'm leaving and entering the primordial chaos void, the 4 heavenly kings will stay behind to preside over my cave abode star. With these 4 half-step heavenly Tao realm existences presiding over it, there will be no problems. Shoo! After he finished speaking, Yi Xian once again looked around at the upper echelons of the demon palace. He slightly nodded as a greeting and didn't say anything else. With a flash of his body, he instantly disappeared from the spot. As for the 4 heavenly kings, they remained in the cave abode star. They were 4 powerful half-step heavenly Tao realm existences. As long as the heavenly legacy beast fused with the heavenly legacy clan's D did not come, any accidents could be easily resolved. While the heavenly legacy beast would need at least a few years to recover from the injuries left behind when it attempted to transcend the heavenly Tao realm tribulation. Yi Xian had only entered the primordial chaos void to test out the 9 transformations Devil Ape bloodline divine power. He would soon return, so there's no need to worry. Shoo! A faint sonic boom sounded as a beam of light flashed. Yi Xian appeared in an extremely remote area deep in the forbidden land of rising dawn. There were only a few abandoned stars in this area, making it appear extremely desolate. Therefore, although the 6 legions in the magic hall had many subordinates, there were no legions stationed in this area. After all, the entrance to the primordial chaos void stellar vortex was here. It was of great importance, so Yi Xian did not even inform the Azure Ox. At present, the stellar vortex passageway that he had concealed with a mystic art was still extremely safe. Apart from Yi Xian, no one else knew about it. Soon, Yi Xian's figure flashed and instantly entered the stellar vortex passageway. He vanished as his aura completely vanished from this primordial chaos void fragment. After a few seconds, the scene before him changed. An extremely dark void appeared in his vision. This void was pitch black with nothing in it. Not even a speck of cosmic dust could be found, much less an abandoned star. Searching ordinary cosmos experts would find nothing even if they wandered aimlessly in this void for an extended period of time. Not even a speck of cosmic dust could be seen, much less an abandoned star. It was as if this was an endless void, slumbering eternally in the darkness. Yi Xian's spirits rose. Calculating the time, it had been almost 10 years since he left this place. In the blink of an eye, 10 years had passed. He had returned to the primordial void again, but it was completely different from when he left this place and entered the fragment of the primordial void. He was now a true primordial supreme. Although he was only at the first stage of the primordial realm, his true battle strength would instantly reach the second stage of the heavenly Tao realm once he activated the 9 changes of the demonic ape in his body and entered the 9th transformation of the demonic ape. Cause in this place, the heavenly Tao realm wasn't the pinnacle of existence. Therefore, the 9 transformations of the demonic ape bloodline ability shouldn't be affected by the suppression of the heavenly Tao. Even though all of this was just Yi Xian's guess, he was rather certain. Now that he was in the primordial void, he would be able to verify it very soon. Xiao! With a thought, Yi Xian's figure vanished from the spot. When he reappeared, he was already more than 100 billion kilometers away. However, this wasn't the end. Following that, he executed a few more extreme teleportations. He only stopped when he was more than 1 trillion kilometers away from the secret passageway that connected to the fragment of the primordial void. The reason why he did this was to avoid the passageway and prevent it from being leaked. After all, he was about to break through to the true heavenly Tao realm. It was bound to attract the attention of many. Even the primeval heavens I was likely to descend because of this. When that happened, Yi Xian would officially face the primeval heaven's eye for the first time and test its combat strength. This was also one of the reasons why he entered the primordial void this time. Everything will descend very soon, muttered Yi Xian. As he muttered to himself, Yi Xian clenched his fists tightly. Without any hesitation, he immediately activated the 3-inch demonic ape's power field that was suspended above his sea of consciousness. The next moment, a faint buzzing sound sounded from Yi Xian's body. All the lifeblood powers in his body were instantly mobilized and circulated. Because of this, the 3-inch devil ape that had been hovering in the air above his sea of consciousness completely disappeared. Transforming, it fused into Yi Xian's body for the sake of some mysterious power. It also had a mysterious effect on all the lifeblood powers around him. Very quickly, Yixian's body immediately began to change. His physical appearance changed as he constantly expanded. In the blink of an eye, he transformed into a black demonic ape that was about 100 feet tall. Apart from that, 2 other bodies grew out of his body. One was a skeleton that was grayish-gold in color. It exuded a metallic texture that gave off an extremely cold feeling. The other was an illusory black fog body. Its aura was extremely ethereal, as though it didn't exist at all. It was completely a black fog. Only its 2 eyes shot out 2 terrifying beams of blazing red light. These 2 bodies were also about 100 feet tall. They were connected to the back of Yixian's physical body, forming a 3-headed, 6-armed demonic ape true body. An incomparably dense and ancient aura spread out from the 3-headed, 6-armed demonic ape true body. This was the demonic ape true body state that Yixian had not activated for a long time. Following after the demonic ape true body was activated, Yixian could no longer see his original appearance. Even the aura of his divine spirit was completely different. This was deliberately done to confuse the heavenly Tao's eye and prevent it from associating him with the master of the magic hall. By that void fragment of the chaos world was still under the suppression of the heavenly Tao's eye. He had no choice but to do this. After everything was ready, Yixian adjusted his state of mind. Without hesitation, he raised his head and roared, directly activating the 9 demonic ape transformations bloodline ability in his body. Roar! 9 demonic ape transformations. 9th transformation. As the roar sounded, the power in Yixian's body instantly surged. His aura was like the roaring of a raging river. His limbs and bones surged with boundless ferocity, and there was even a terrifying energy of vital energy and blood that was majestic to the point of being shocking, gushing out from his body. Originally it was only 100 feet tall, but in the blink of an eye, it rapidly expanded like a balloon. In less than 3 breaths of time, it had already reached a size of 60 million miles, like a giant star. In addition, the cultivation aura emanating from the 3-headed, 6-armed demonic ape true body rose at the same time as his body. When the 60 million feet tall body appeared, the demonic ape true body's cultivation aura had reached the terrifying 2nd stage of the heavenly Tao realm. In an instant, Yixian felt that there was an invisible membrane in the surrounding void. Previously he could not touch it, but now it was extremely clear. He knew that this was the power of the heavenly Tao. In the primordial world, this was the strongest power. But in this primordial world, it was only the power of a slightly stronger realm. Below the heavenly Tao realm, there was definitely an even higher level. Please remember the domain name of this book. Mobile reading website Chapter 4901. Roar. 9 transformations of the devil ape. 9th transformation. As the angry roar sounded, the power in Yixian's body instantly surged. His body, which was only 100 feet tall, rapidly expanded like a balloon in a blink of an eye. Short in less than 3 seconds, he had reached a size of 60 million kilometers. He was like a gigantic planet. The cultivation aura emitted from his body had reached the terrifying 2nd stage of the heavenly Tao realm. At that moment, Yixian's heart, which had been hanging in his throat, finally calmed down. His guess was right. The reason why the 9 transformations of the devil ape bloodline divine powers cultivation enhancement was ineffective in the primordial desolate world fragments void was because the world's will there was the primeval heaven's eye. The heaven's Tao's eye was already the strongest existence. Without its recognition, no living being or existence could take that step forward and come into contact with the true strength of the heavenly Tao realm. But the primordial chaos void was an existence of a higher level than the primordial desolate world. Even the primordial desolate world was only the land of 3,000 fiend gods that was born in the primordial chaos epoch. It was also a world that Pengu had sacrificed himself to create when he created the world. But compared to the primordial chaos void, which had experienced countless samsara epochs, the so-called primordial desolate world was nothing. But here the heavenly Tao realm was not even the limit of cosmos expanse experts. There were even stronger existences. Furthermore, the primordial chaos void was like a free void without the consciousness of the heavenly Tao. Here there was only the suppression of the primordial chaos laws. The suppression of the heavenly Tao did not exist. To put it simply, the so-called heavenly Tao realm was like the primordial mighty figure realm or the primordial paragon realm in the primordial desolate world. It was just a realm level. But once one's strength reached a certain level and took that step, any living being could freely enter the heavenly Tao realm. Now Yi Xian was in such a situation. With the 9 transformations of the Devil Ape bloodline powers, he had successfully entered the heavenly Tao realm. Furthermore, he was at the second stage of the heavenly Tao realm. After entering this realm, Yi Xian felt that there was suddenly a layer of membrane in the void around him. Previously he could not touch it, but now he could feel it clearly. This was the power of the heavenly Tao. Although he had only temporarily come into contact with it through the 9 Devil Ape transformations bloodline ability, it was extremely important to Yi Xian. In an instant he gained all sorts of insights. His mind flashed one after another, and they didn't stop. Even the devouring system in his body, which he had always been unable to understand, seemed to have gained some sort of understanding at this moment. It was too complicated and obscure, and required time to deduce and explore before he could understand it. All of this was extremely profound. It was only after he came into contact with the strength of the heavenly Tao realm that he was able to sense it. He felt that it was too profound. If he had to use words to describe it at this moment, he felt as if he had been enlightened, boom. Rumble, kacha. Right at this moment, numerous rumbling that shook the heavens and the earth resounded. A rift appeared high up in the sky, and it suddenly became even more obvious. At this moment, Yi Xian's heart pounded wildly. His heartstrings tightened, and his breathing seemed to have stopped. There was no need to guess at all. He had already realized who the existence that was tearing through the void was. Sure enough, in the next moment his guess was verified. Swoosh! A faint sound of something breaking through the air rang out, and a figure rushed out from this huge crack in the void. Quasi. To be precise, it was a vertical eye that was several times larger than a giant star. It was completely misty green, and at this moment it was still closed, but it was already emitting an aura that made one's heart palpitate incomparably. Primeval Heaven's Eye. And moreover, its aura was different from the heavenly Tao's eye that had appeared twice in a short period of time in the void of the Great Desolate World fragment. It was clearer and more real. But, at the same time, it was also more powerful. Without a doubt, what had appeared in the void crack high up in the sky was the original body of the primeval Heaven's Eye, which was also the will of the Great Desolate World. Countless fragments of the Great Desolate World that were formed after the collapse of the Great Desolate World was the controller of the heavenly Tao. Previously, in the void of the Great Desolate World fragment, D had tried to break through to the heavenly Tao realm one after another. The primeval Heaven's Eye had only sent a projection avatar. It was enough to show that although he attached great importance to those 2 incidents, he did not take them too seriously. By that was the void of the Great Desolate World fragment, a place that was controlled by him. There, he was the supreme will of the heavenly Tao. Even if someone tried to break through to the true heavenly Tao realm, he only needed to send a projection avatar to deal with it. Because as long as he did not approve of the will of the heavenly Tao, no matter how strong the existence was, they would not be able to truly take that step. But, here, in the void of the Great Desolate World, the situation was completely different. Even the green eye of the Way of Heaven in the Untainted Land was no different from the other experts in the starry sky. He was at most a relatively powerful existence. In addition, although he could intervene to stop any living being that attempted to break through to the heavenly Tao realm, such interference was akin to a battle between starry sky experts. It was completely different from the invisible suppression at the heavenly Tao level. If the other party was stronger than him, he could not even stop them. There was nothing he could do therefore. When he sensed the terrifying aura of a true heavenly Tao realm expert suddenly appearing in the Great Desolate World, not only did the primeval Heaven's Eye immediately descend, it even sent its true body. It showed how important it was previously. Yi Xian felt that the primeval Heaven's Eye was extremely powerful and mysterious. After all, it was a manifestation of the will of the heavenly Tao. However, this so-called power was an extremely vague concept. Yi Xian only knew that he was definitely not its match, far from it. However, he did not have a clear idea of how powerful it was. He could not use a clear classification to measure and compare it with himself. However, that was in the past. For example, today, Yi Xian had activated his Devil Ape bloodline, and cast the 9 Devil Ape transformations bloodline divine power to the 9th transformation. His cultivation level had reached the true second stage of the heavenly Tao realm. In fact, due to the devil-ape true body's massive body and the terrifying lifeblood powers augmenting it, his true combat strength could be raised to another level. It was enough to match a third-stage heavenly Tao realm expert. With the support of this kind of cultivation, Yi Xian once again saw the heavenly Tao azure eyes of the desolate era. Moreover, it was in such a situation where he was facing it head-on. This was the first time he had a clear understanding of the true strength of the heavenly Tao azure eyes. The 8th stage of the heavenly Tao realm was just a step away from the 9th stage's perfection. At that moment, Yi Xian clearly sensed the level of strength of the primeval heaven's eye. Although he was alarmed, he felt a sense of security as though a boulder had been lifted. His present peak combat strength was only comparable to a third-stage heavenly Tao realm expert. Compared to the primeval heaven's eye at the 8th stage of the realm, he was indeed much weaker. However, at the very least he finally knew the gap between them. He was no longer like before, only knowing that his opponent was very powerful, but not knowing the limits of that power. Please remember the domain name of this book. Mobile reading website Chapter 4902. Boom! Rumble. Kacha! An earth-shattering boom rang out, and a crack appeared high up in the sky. It abruptly grew bigger, and a figure rushed out from this huge crack in the sky. To be precise, it was a vertical eye. A vertical eye that was several times larger than a gigantic planet. It was green and misty. At that moment it was still closed, but it was already emitting an aura that made one's heart palpitate. 8th stage heavenly Tao realm. It was just a step away from the 9th stage perfection. At the same time that this scene caused Yi Xian's heart to tremble, it also aroused his intense fighting spirit. Now, his peak combat strength was only comparable to a third-stage heavenly Tao realm expert. Compared to the 8th stage primeval heaven's eye, he was indeed much weaker. But at the very least he now knew how big the gap was between them. He was no longer like before, only knowing that his opponent was very strong, but not knowing the limits of that strength. So what if it's an 8th stage heavenly Tao realm expert? The heavens fall bow isn't. It's just that I haven't killed it before. As it murmured to itself, scorching purplish golden light suddenly erupted from the eyes of the skeletal body of the devilish ape, and a mysterious aura surged forth like a raging river. The next instant the skeleton raised its left arm. The empty palm of its left hand suddenly flared with golden light, and a golden bow in the form of energy appeared in its left hand. The entire bow's design was simple and ferocious. In the middle of the palm was a two-headed strange beast. In the mouth of the ferocious beast that was facing up and down, there were two human-shaped spirit creatures biting the legs of two humanoid creatures. And the two humanoid life forms also opened their mouths in anger, as though they were roaring. A bowstring that was clearly formed by countless thin golden threads was connected to the two humanoid life forms' wide mouths. It was the primordial Yaksha's most powerful divine power. The heavens fall bow. In the primordial war, the primordial Yaksha that was as powerful as the void gigantic tortoise, and the golden divine dragon had used this most powerful divine power to shoot a gigantic, irreparable hole in the primordial world. Even the heavenly Tao green eye, which represented the will of the primordial heavenly Tao, was almost shot down by that arrow after countless years of recovery and hibernation. The current green eye of the heavenly way's cultivation of the 8th stage of the heavenly way might have already surpassed its cultivation level when the primordial war broke out. However, at that time the primordial Yaksha was only a peak desolate supremacy at the 9th stage of perfection. Now Yi Xian's combat strength was comparable to a third-stage heavenly Tao. If he were to shoot this arrow now, the threat to the heavenly Tao's green eye was probably even greater than the incomparable battle in the primordial world back then. This was precisely the source of Yi Xian's confidence. Otherwise, with his current heavenly Tao 3-star cultivation, even if he only had the thought of retreating after a single clash, testing the true battle prowess of the heavenly Tao's azure eye would be incomparably dangerous. But now that he had the fallen sky bow, the situation was completely different. At this very moment, as he activated the small golden bow suspended in his sea of consciousness, it transformed into a huge bow with an incomparably powerful aura in the left hand of the skeleton clone. As expected, the heavenly Tao's azure eye, which had just descended from the sky in front of him, flashed with a strong sense of fear. However, Yi Xian did not continue. Although the skeleton's right hand was on the bowstring of the huge bow, the golden energy arrow did not appear on the string. In fact, he had no intention of truly pulling this arrow. This was because once the arrow was released, Yi Xian's strength would be mostly depleted and he would be in danger. If this arrow did not kill the Heavenly Tao's azure eye, then it would really be troublesome. Without any other backup plans, he definitely could not be so reckless. Furthermore, he had not tested the true battle prowess of the Heavenly Tao's azure eye, and was not very clear about its background. Yi Xian did not have much confidence in being able to kill it with one arrow. Back then, didn't the primordial Yaksha miss with one arrow? If he had perished in that battle, the root cause was very likely that the arrow had instantly drained most of his strength, causing him to be in a weakened state. Yi Xian would definitely not make such a mistake again. Without full confidence or being forced into a desperate situation, he would definitely not take the initiative to release this arrow when facing an existence at the level of the Heavenly Tao's azure eye now. The reason why he had activated the fallen sky bow and only condensed the body of the huge bow without the golden energy arrow was to deter the Heavenly Tao's azure eye. In fact, he had achieved his goal. The primordial Heavenly Tao azure eye's descent was because it had sensed the appearance of a new Heavenly Tao realm aura. It wanted to stop or kill it directly. Furthermore, with its terrifying cultivation level at the 8th stage of the Heavenly Tao realm, it was completely possible for it to do so. Otherwise, it would not have rushed over so confidently. But now, with its descent, just as it was about to take action, Yi Xian's skeleton suddenly raised its hand and activated the fallen sky bow. In the skeleton's raised left hand, a ferocious energy bow condensed. It was precisely the appearance of this enormous bow that caused the figure of Heaven's Path's Qing Yan to freeze, and a dark light burst forth from his weak eyes. There was even a wisp of fear that was so dense that it couldn't be dispersed, and it imperceptibly spread out. Fallen sky bow? Why would it appear in your hands? Could it be that Yaksha has really perished? In the next moment, as the figure of the Heavenly Tao green eye that was about to shoot over came to an abrupt stop, an incomparably deep voice resounded in this void. Also, who are you? I've never seen you before, but why do I feel a sense of familiarity? Roar! Yi Xian did not pay attention to his words. It was best not to speak at such a time. It was best to let the other party be confused and suspicious. The more he spoke, the more likely it was to slip up. With a thought, the 3 devil ape avatars raised their heads and roared angrily at the same time. Immediately following that, Yi Xian's body swayed, and his body of flesh and blood instantly swung its right fist. With a terrifying aura that could destroy the world, it blasted towards the Heavenly Tao's azure eye that was hundreds of billions of kilometers away. During this period, the skeleton did not move at all. Its left arm was raised high, and its right hand was placed on the bowstring. It could condense a golden arrow at any time and shoot it out. Similarly, the black fog avatar did not move at all. However, its pair of eyes that were as deep as the stars were constantly staring at the Heavenly Tao's azure eye that was hundreds of billions of kilometers away, waiting for an opportunity to take action. So you only wanted to test my strength? A wisp of understanding flashed through Tian Daoqing's eyes, and there seemed to be a faint trace of ridicule. Even the voice he transmitted through his divine sense was filled with an inexplicable sense of disdain. A mere 3rd order of the Heavenly Tao actually has such courage. You're quite extraordinary. Unfortunately, an ant is still an ant in the end. The difference between a minor stage in the Heavenly Tao realm is already like a natural chasm, much less a difference of 5 minor stages between us. Killing you will be as easy as crushing an ant. Phew! Before the divine perception voice could finish, a green beam suddenly shot out from the gigantic vertical eye in front of him. An unprecedented sense of danger instantly enveloped Yi Xian's heart, causing his expression to change drastically. Chapter 4903. Phew! Before the voice could fade away, the gigantic vertical eye in front of him suddenly shot out an azure beam of light. At that moment, an unprecedented sense of danger enveloped Yi Xian's heart. It made his expression change drastically. His body that was shooting forward came to a halt in midair, as though it was a conditioned reflex. In the distance, the cyan light that shot out of the eyes of Great Way of the Heavens was not very large. It was only tens of thousands of meters in diameter, and its aura was not very strong either. However, as the cyan light shot out, An indescribable aura suddenly boiled up in the space within a radius of trillions of miles. It was formless and formless as it came crushing down on Yixian's figure. This was the power of the heavenly Tao, although it wasn't the strongest power in the primordial chaos void, and there were even higher levels. Yixian was only at the third stage of the heavenly Tao. Furthermore, he was only able to sense it ahead of time by using the 9 Devil Ape Transformations bloodline mystic technique. It could be said that his understanding of the power of the Way of the Heavens was almost completely blank. However, the green eye of the Way of the Heavens was different. His control of the power of the Way of the Heavens must have reached a level of perfection. If he was in the primordial chaos, he could control a portion of the void and instantly gather the entire void's power to kill any existence. In the primordial chaos void, although he couldn't control a portion of the void, the heavenly Tao's power that he could use was enough to crush Yixian. This wasn't because Yixian had miscalculated, but because he had yet to truly enter the heavenly Tao realm. He didn't understand all of this, or he probably wouldn't have had the thought of probing the primeval Heaven's Eye's true combat strength. Despite being in the same void as his opponent, his control of the heavenly Tao's power was far inferior to his opponent's. Yet, he still wanted to attack his opponent to test his combat strength. This was the most foolish method. It was no different from putting himself in danger. You aren't at the true heavenly Tao realm. You only use some mystic technique to instantly raise yourself to this level. It's no wonder I haven't seen you before. How can a true heavenly Tao realm appear so easily? How can an unfamiliar existence appear so casually? Clearly, the primeval heavens I had already guessed the truth from Yixian's foolish actions. At that moment, Yixian's figure suddenly came to a halt. The primeval Heaven's Eye's deep voice once again, filled with endless disdain and coldness. A mere desolate supremacy dares to act so boldly just because he grasped a rather extraordinary bloodline mystic technique. You truly don't know death. Hearing these words, Yixian's heart sank to the bottom of the valley. At this moment, he thought of immediately activating the interstellar coordinate jump ability of the Devouring system in his body. Although he was suspicious and wary of the Devouring system, he had to admit that the interstellar coordinate jumping ability of the Devouring system was very powerful. Unfortunately, with just a thought, Yixian immediately discarded this thought because it was utterly impossible. There was an extremely terrifying energy of the heavenly Tao rumbling over from all directions like a raging river. Although he had never tried it before, based on his experience and deduction, even if he activated the interstellar coordinate jump ability of the Devouring system in his body, it would be useless. He would not be able to activate it successfully, and it would be a waste of time instead. This was a battle at the heavenly Tao realm. Even a split second could determine life and death. At that moment, Yixian couldn't afford to waste a second. As these thoughts flashed through his mind, an extremely dense murderous aura spread out from the 3 true forms of the devil ape. At this moment, the fingers of the skeleton on the bowstring of the heaven-fallen bow moved slightly. Since he couldn't escape with Yixian's character, there was no way he would just sit there and wait for death. He decided to use the heaven-fallen bow. Even if it would weaken him and put him in a difficult situation, it would at least give him a chance to severely injure the primeval Heaven's Eye and escape. Otherwise, if he didn't do anything, he would definitely die. All of this seemed to take a long time to describe, but in fact it all flashed through his mind in a split second. Just as Yixian was about to activate the heaven-fallen bow in the skeleton's hand to condense the golden energy arrow that was powerful enough to destroy the world and shoot it out, something strange happened. Phew! In that moment of life and death, the left side of Yixian's flesh and blood suddenly became hot and emitted an incomparably familiar low buzzing sound. This was clearly the rhythm of the headless infant corpse that had been hibernating on his left chest that had turned into a corpse lamp tattoo, suddenly waking up. At this moment, Yixian was shocked and withdrew his thoughts of activating the heaven-fallen bow. However, before he could extend the power of his divine sense to the left side of his chest, and use it to communicate with the headless infant's corpse that had just woken up, an almost imperceptible sound broke through the air. After the left side of his chest suddenly burned up, it instantly returned to normal. At the same time, a blood-red light rushed out from the left side of his chest. The headless infant's corpse actually left Yixian's body and officially appeared in the vision of the primeval Heaven's Eye in its original form. In the next moment, A dim light burst out from the void in front of him and revealed a ferocious infant's corpse. Its head was tightly held in its arms and had been tightly closed all this time. The headless infant's corpse had descended and imperceptibly emitted the aura of a sovereign. It had a feeling that the moment the infant's corpse appeared, all living things would submit to it. Although it was only a foot tall and looked extremely small, its aura was in no way weaker than the massive primeval Heaven's Eyes avatar. 8th stage of the Heavenly Tao realm? At this moment, even Yi Xian sucked in a breath of cold air. He cried out involuntarily, but his tone revealed a deep sense of joy. With the appearance of the infant's corpse's true body, he, who was already at the Heavenly Tao realm, could sense the headless infant's present cultivation level and strength with just a glance. Previously, when he faced the headless infant's corpse, it was the same as when he faced the primeval Heaven's Eye. He only knew that it was extremely powerful, but he had a vague idea of how powerful it was. Now, from this moment on, he had an extremely clear understanding of the headless infant's corpse's cultivation level and strength. Just based on this point, this trip to the primordial chaos void was not in vain. Although it's a little early, the 8th stage of the Heavenly Tao realm is almost there. Just as Yi Xian's exclamation faded, a shrill voice resounded in the void. It was the headless infant's voice. It seemed to contain a faint sense of helplessness and depression. I can't just watch you be killed by that old geezer, here, right? Since all of this has come ahead of time, there's nothing much to say. Having said that, the headless infant's corpse paused for a moment before continuing. Countless years have passed. Although the primordial chaos apocalypse has yet to fully descend, it is indeed time for my Heavenly Tao true body to be reconstructed. As soon as he finished speaking, the head of the infant corpse in his arms suddenly opened its eyes. Chapter 4904. Since all of this has come early, then there's nothing more to say. 3-1 quick update. Countless years have passed. Although the apocalypse of the primordial era has yet to fully descend, it's time for my Heavenly Tao true body to be rebuilt. Buzz. As soon as he finished speaking, the head of the infant corpse in his arms suddenly opened its eyes. 2 rays of blood-red light shot out, exuding an endless murderous aura. Even Yi Xian shuddered, and the vast void within a radius of trillions of miles trembled slightly because of this. The murderous aura was too thick. However, this was understandable. The headless infant corpse was born in the early stages of the primordial era, because it held a strand of heaven's destiny in its hands. It was an artificial heaven's way formed by the so-called demonic cultivators, who controlled the primordial Heavenly Tao law of the primordial era. Although it succeeded when it was born, it had already been led by the primeval Heaven's Eye, a group of beings in the early stages of the primordial era, who were no different from the so-called demonic cultivators of the primordial era. In the end, before it had matured, it was killed by the Heavenly Tao's eye and could be said to have died prematurely. This kind of experience, after countless years of brewing, accumulated resentment could be imagined. Previously, this resentment had been suppressed by the headless infant corpse in the head of the infant corpse that it was holding in its arms. But now, as the pair of blood-red eyes of the infant corpse opened for the first time, it suddenly leaked out. "It's you. You really didn't die." It was only at this moment that the primeval Heaven's Eyes exclamation came from the void in front of him, although he had long known that the Heavenly Tao infant corpse had not died, and had even been secretly searching for traces of it for many years. After Yi Xian descended into the starry sky, there were even a few accidents that led to the headless infant corpse and the primeval Heaven's Eye to secretly come into contact, but all this time, the two had never directly come into contact with each other. Now this moment had finally come, and it came so unexpectedly. Even the primeval Heaven's Eye was extremely surprised. After a cry of surprise, the primeval Heaven's Eye's eyes suddenly flashed with a dark light. The invisible aura of coldness soared several times as it roared. But it doesn't matter. Since you've appeared today, you're destined to die. So what if you're an 8th stage Heavenly Tao? Now you're just a divine soul without a physical body. Physical body? There will be. In the previous epoch, I was born with destiny, but I died prematurely. Although it has nothing to do with you, Hongmeng, you owe me karma. Bloody light burst out from the eyes of the headless baby corpse, and soft murmurs that sounded like sleep talk came out. Almost in the next instant, a second incomparably mysterious low buzzing sound rang out. Hum. Swish! Before Yixian could react, endless and weak sounds of breaking through the air sounded out from all directions. Rays of light appeared out of thin air from all directions, covering the sky and covering the earth. It was as if they were being attracted by some invisible force, and as if they were being driven by an unseen force, they all converged towards the headless corpse of the infant that was 50 billion kilometers in front of Yixian. Converged. This was the nomological power of the primeval void. In terms of level and grade, it had already surpassed the nomological powers of the primordial world. Although it was incomparable to the top-notch primordial world providence in this void, it was more than enough to condense a heavenly Tao realm body. The primordial world had existed for countless years, and it had a transcendent status. There had never been an eye of the heavenly Tao that seemed to be the embodiment of the primordial heavenly Tao's will. However, in this void, there was an invisible nomological power that operated everything. Just a moment ago, the headless infant corpse was conversing with the nomological powers of the primordial world. It seemed to be seeking to end the karma from countless years ago. The nomological powers of the primordial world that transformed into countless beams of light that shot over from all directions was the price to pay for ending the karma from providence. To the primordial void that possessed an extraordinary status, such a little bit of the primordial laws was nothing. It was even to the extent that it was not even a hair on 9 oxen. However, to the headless infant corpse, it was the best thing to condense the body of the heaven Tao. Similarly, to the eye of the heavenly Tao who was standing opposite the headless infant corpse, the incoming nomological powers of the primordial world were a huge threat. Although he did not wish to see this happen, he was powerless to stop it. As the embodiment of the primordial heavenly Tao's will, he was the supreme ruler in the primordial world. However, in the primordial world he was no different from other experts in the cosmos. Now, the nomological powers of the primordial world seemed to have sensed something. After the headless infant corpse took the initiative to ask, it wanted to end the karma from back then. Under such circumstances, if the primeval heavens I tried to stop it and destroy it, the consequences would undoubtedly be extremely serious. It would be like a creature in the primordial heavenly Tao being suppressed by the will of the primordial world. It would instantly feel the rejection and suppression of the nomological powers of the primordial world. If that was really the case, then while he was being suppressed by the nether laws of the primordial chaos, he would have to face his old enemy, the headless infant corpse that would soon condense the heavenly Tao body. At that time, the situation he would face would be extremely severe and dangerous. It was not entirely impossible for it to die here. It was precisely because of this that although the green eye of the primordial heavenly Tao was extremely unwilling, it could only sigh in the face of the power of the laws of primordial chaos that was shooting at it from all directions. In the end, it suppressed the thought of taking the risk to attack and watched everything unwillingly from the side. Swish! Swish, swish, swish! In all directions, far and near, rays of light appeared out of thin air, blotting out the sky and covering the earth. Their speed was extremely fast, and in just 3 breaths of time, they all gathered, forming a colorful sea that spanned billions of miles, completely drowning the headless infant corpse that was standing there quietly. 100 billion kilometers away, Yixian had already stopped moving. The dark light in his eyes continuously flickered, and his heart was already in his throat. He did not make any strange movements, because he had long realized the difference between him and the primeval heaven's eye. Perhaps only by stepping into the 7th level of the heavenly Tao realm and becoming an existence at the late stages of the realm would he have the possibility of fighting it head-on. At this moment, the headless infant corpse was condensing his heavenly Tao body. Due to the participation of the nomological powers of the primordial world, even the primeval heavens I did not dare to interfere in this process. As such, there was no possibility of external interference. It could be said that the only key to the future development of today's situation was the headless infant corpse. As long as his heavenly Tao body could be successfully condensed, then everything was possible. Chapter 4905. Swish! Swish, swish, swish! In all directions, rays of light appeared out of thin air. Its momentum covered the sky and covered the earth, and its speed was extremely fast. In merely 3 short breaths of time, it had all gathered together and formed a multicolored ocean. This ocean was tens of billions of kilometers wide, and it was completely condensed from the precious power of the primordial chaos laws. In the blink of an eye, it had completely submerged the headless infant corpse that was standing quietly in the void in front of it. Facing all of this, whether it was Yixian or primeval Heaven's Eye, neither dared to interfere. It was as if they were outsiders, separated by this vast ocean of law energy. Watching from afar, however, the two of them were clearly in completely different states of mind at this moment. Primeval Heaven's Eye's heart sank to the bottom of the valley, incomparably heavy. As for Yixian, although his expression was calm, his eyes were burning with excitement. From time to time a bright light would burst forth, revealing a hint of excitement and anticipation. Wang. Almost at the same instant that this 10 billion kilometer wide mottled ocean gathered together, an incomparably deep buzzing sound came from the center of the ocean. Although it was almost undetectable, it still existed and did not disappear. As this faint buzzing sound rang out, in the void in front of them, the entire ocean of 10 billion kilometers wide suddenly seemed to be affected by some kind of suction force, and it was as if an invisible vortex had appeared in the center of this vast ocean. Boundless waves surged up, and the endless power of the primordial laws in the entire ocean suddenly began to condense inwards. The speed was very fast, and in just 3 breaths of time, the originally 10 billion kilometers wide ocean was only left with a radius of 100 million kilometers. However, everything was not over yet. Even though it had condensed to a radius of 100 million kilometers, and its density had increased by 100 times, the size of this ocean was still shrinking. Another 3 breaths passed, and the last 100 million kilometers of ocean disappeared as well. A ball of light appeared in the void up ahead. It was only a meter in diameter and was oval-shaped. It stood in the void like a mysterious egg. An extremely powerful aura emanated from the egg. It was identical to the billowing baneful aura unique to the headless infant's corpse. Not only was the aura identical, even its cultivation level was the same. It was still at the 8th stage of the heavenly Tao realm. Without a doubt, the heavenly Tao true body of the headless infant corpse was being nurtured within this mysterious egg that was formed purely from the boundless primordial laws. Moreover, this type of nurturing definitely wouldn't take too long. It would end soon. And that was indeed the case. Kacha? Kachacha? After the oval egg with a diameter of only a meter appeared, it only took another 3 breaths before a clear cracking sound came from that location again, like a piece of silk being torn. On the surface of the oval egg, dense spiderwebs appeared. Then the entire egg collapsed. Not a single part of the egg was wasted. After all, this egg was condensed from the pure power of primordial laws, so it was far too precious. As the egg cracked, countless egg fragments of various sizes instantly transformed into a ball of light that condensed inwards. This time it was even faster. In just an instant the egg had vanished, leaving not a single piece behind. And what appeared within the egg was the headless infant corpse now. He was no longer in an energy form of a divine soul state. Instead, he possessed a true body of flesh and blood. His body was still only a foot long, and he still looked like an infant. However, what was surprising was that even though he had condensed a true heavenly Tao true body, and one that was formed from pure and massive primordial laws, the headless infant corpse that appeared in front of him was still headless for some unknown reason after the egg disappeared. It had an extremely ferocious expression, and its head was held in his left arm by his chest. The headless infant corpse now looked no different from before. The overflowing fiendish aura was still the same, and the ferocious appearance was still the same. Even the cultivation aura that emanated from his body was still the same. It was still at the 8th level of the heavenly Tao realm. The only difference was that he was previously in an energy form of a divine soul state, but now he had a true physical body. Furthermore, this body was extremely pure and was condensed from massive amounts of primordial chaos laws. Its strength was something that even primordial heavenly Tao Green-Eyed, who was at the 8th stage of the heavenly Tao realm, could only sigh at his inadequacy. Even if he struck with all his strength, it would probably be difficult to severely injure him. Now, do you still want to say that you will kill me here? As the heavenly Tao true body formed from the endless primordial laws was successfully formed, the headless infant corpse's voice rang out once again. It was still as sharp as a baby's cry, and it exuded an endless fiendish aura. However, I've already spoken. You are the heavenly Tao's eye, the embodiment of the primordial heavenly Tao's will. Isn't it a little embarrassing to go back on your word? Whoosh! Boom! Before his voice died away, the headless infant corpse made the first move. His body, which was only a foot tall, transformed into a beam of light and shot forward. Its speed was so fast that even Yixian was dazzled. In the blink of an eye, the headless infant corpse had left the distance of hundreds of billions of miles behind. The headless infant corpse, which was only a foot tall, appeared right in front of the green eye of the prehistorical great Tao of nature, only hundreds of millions of miles away. The difference in size between the two was too big. Although the primeval heaven's eye was only a vertical eye, it was hundreds of millions of miles in size. It was incomparably huge. On the other hand, although the headless infant corpse had the body of a normal human, it was only a foot tall. At such a close distance, their auras locked onto each other, and they were facing each other with equal harshness. This scene was simply too bizarre at this moment. The headless infant corpse's head was in his left arm, but his right arm suddenly stretched out, and he threw a punch at the incomparably huge primeval heaven's eye. Boom! Rumble! The strength was too majestic, and its aura was shocking. When the punch was thrown, the entire endless void, which was hundreds of millions of miles away, trembled. So what if you are the heavenly Tao true body formed from the primordial laws? You still can't do anything to me? Whoosh! At this moment, the deep voice of the green eye of the heavens rang out once more. Its pupils constricted, and a beam of azure light shot out toward the headless nascent soul's fist. It rumbled as it shot toward the incoming headless nascent soul's corpse. Rumble! Kacha! Screech! Countless years have passed, and this scene has unexpectedly arrived. The time seems to have come a little early, and this is beyond my expectations. Right at this moment, an earth-shattering rumble sounded from the right side of the primeval heaven's eye. A crack appeared in the void, and a turtle claw as large as a star stretched out. The tyrannical howl clearly belonged to the void tortoise. However, what caused Yixian to be greatly shocked was that when the giant void tortoise descended and extended its claw, it actually didn't attack the green eye of the great desolate heavenly Tao. Its target was clearly the headless corpse of the infant. Chapter 4906. Rumble! Kacha! Screech! At that moment, a sudden turn of events happened. To the right of the primeval heaven's eye, a shocking boom sounded as the void tore open. A turtle claw that resembled a star extended out. The screech was very familiar. It left Yixian's heart palpitating. It was clearly the voice of the void gigantic turtle. However, what left him appalled was that despite the void gigantic turtle's unexpected arrival, the claw that it extended out was not aimed at the primeval heaven's eye. Its target was clearly the headless infant corpse. Bam! Bam! Pwah! Everything happened too quickly. Before he could react, the huge green light beam shot out from the green eyes of the untainted heavenly way had already blasted the headless corpse of the infant. At the critical moment, the void tortoise's gigantic claw, which was far larger than a giant planet, landed squarely on the headless corpse. There was almost no gap between the two attacks, as though they had descended at the same time. It was obvious how terrifying the combined strength was. The primeval heaven's eye was a supreme existence at the late stages of the heavenly Tao realm to begin with. Furthermore, it had been entangled with the headless infant corpse for eons. Now that it had met again after so many years, it had definitely used its full strength in its furious strike. Although the void gigantic turtle was not a true heavenly Tao realm expert, it was a super old monster that had lived from the early stages of the primeval desolate era to the present. In that battle, the primeval Yaksha had used its supreme divine power, Heaven Falling Bow, and nearly shot the primeval heaven's eye down from high in the sky. It was obvious that peak desolate supremacies that were born in the early stages of the primeval desolate era basically had divine powers similar to Heaven Falling Bow. Once they used it at full strength, the terrifying strength they could instantly reach was absolutely astounding to heavenly Tao realm experts. The void gigantic turtle's sudden appearance at such a critical moment was definitely not a coincidence. If there were no accidents, it was very likely that it had been lying in ambush by the side, using the isolating forces of the different voids to conceal its aura. Under such circumstances, his attack was well prepared and could be said to have been premeditated for a long time. The instantaneous burst of power under full power was definitely not weaker than the effect of the ancient Yaksha's ultimate move. the skyfall bow. To put it simply, the void gigantic turtle's strike might be inferior to the primordial heavenly Tao's azure eye at the late stages of the heavenly Tao realm, but the difference was definitely not too great. It also meant that at that instant, the headless infant corpse was equivalent to receiving the full strength strike of two late-stage heavenly Tao realm experts. Although he had already condensed a heavenly Tao true body that was condensed from massive amounts of great void laws, the shock he received from being struck by two late-stage heavenly Tao realm powers when he was caught off guard was obvious. In the void, after two astounding booms, there was a dull thud. The headless infant corpse was sent flying backward as it spewed out a mouthful of blood. His body was condensed from massive amounts of primordial chaos void nomological powers. Even a drop of blood was the same. At that moment, when the blood spewed out, it instantly dissipated into a rain of light before transforming back into pure primordial chaos nomological powers and returning to the void. Void turtle, you deserve to die. Roar. Screech. Upon seeing this scene, Yi Xian's eyes nearly popped out of their sockets. His three true forms raised their heads and roared angrily. Their shocking roars were filled with endless indignation. Although he did not participate in the epic battle that shattered the entire primordial chaos, he could clearly see scenes of the battlefield from the heritage images of supreme divine powers like the Skyfall Bow. In the vast and endless primordial chaos void battlefield, countless primordial chaos beings were engaged in battle. Only the single-horned weeping soul demon ape was lurking behind a gigantic planet. Its actions were mysterious. The other primordial chaos beings were divided into two battalions. Their standpoints were clear as they fought to the death. It could be said that Yi Xian was the only one who was wary of all the ancient creatures that had participated in that primordial war. The only one he suspected was the weeping soul demon ape. Later on, he discovered Xingbo's true identity and realized that the relationship between Xingbo and the Great Desolate Heavenly Tao was mysterious, and that they must have colluded. At the same time, he knew that there was a weeping soul demon ape among the followers by Xingbo's side. However, when Xingbo appeared in this world and didn't see the weeping soul demon ape, the suspicion in Yi Xian's heart grew even stronger. He was extremely suspicious that the primeval Heaven's Eye and Xingbo had already colluded as early as the epic battle broke out. However, he could not deduce where Xingbo was at that time and what his identity was. However, the weeping soul demonic ape that had appeared in the primordial era's great void battlefield, lurking behind a gigantic star and acting strangely, was very likely to be one of Xingbo's followers. Such a guess made him sniff the air. He smelled the scent of a conspiracy that originated from the epic battle in the primordial chaos. However, Yi Xian's suspicions and vigilance had always been limited to the Great Desolate Heavenly Tao's green eyes, Xingbo, and the weeping soul demon ape. He never would have thought that there would be a spy in his own camp with the headless corpse. Furthermore, this spy was actually the void giant tortoise. One had to know that when the epic battle broke out, it was the most powerful peak desolate supremacy warrior under the headless infant corpse. Even during the epic battle that had collapsed the entire primordial chaos world, the void giant tortoise had been fighting bravely. After the battle, it had been entangled with the withered devil blade of the heavenly demon for countless years. It was only recently that it was rescued by Yi Xian. It had hidden too deeply. No matter who it was, no one would have thought that it was a spy from the enemy camp. It had not revealed any flaws for countless years. However, at this moment, when the headless infant corpse had just appeared and successfully condensed the heavenly Tao true body, at the most critical moment, it had joined forces with the primeval Heaven's Eye to heavily injure the heavenly Tao green eye. All of this flashed through Yi Xian's mind like lightning, causing his entire body to feel cold. In his heart, there was endless fury surging and roaring. Screech! Bang! Hiss! Just at this moment, the headless infant corpse's incomparably shrill howl suddenly came from the void to the left in front of him. Following this howl, an earth-shattering explosion sounded. The heavenly Tao true body that the headless infant corpse had just condensed actually exploded at this moment, causing countless rays of light to explode. This physical body had just been condensed from a massive amount of primordial law power, and now it had exploded in the blink of an eye. If nothing unexpected happened, the rain of light would completely dissipate, turning into the power of the primordial law, and once again fusing into this void. All of his previous efforts were equivalent to a drop in the bucket. However, what surprised Yixian was that as the heavenly Tao true body of the headless infant corpse completely exploded, a rain of light burst forth, and a crack was actually torn open in the primordial chaos void. Behind the crack was a brilliant starlight, and the aura that was emitted was clearly that of the Milky Way star region. Whoosh! Before he could react, a beam of blood-red light shot out from the burst of light rain and rushed into the Milky Way star field in the crack. It was clearly the headless infant corpse's divine soul, and it disappeared in the blink of an eye. At this moment, a voice sounded in Yixian's mind. Success! I'll go first and wait for you. Chapter 4907. Screech! Bang! Hiss! In the distant void to the left, the headless infant corpse suddenly let out a shrill scream. The heavenly path true body he had just condensed actually exploded at this moment, and countless rays of light burst forth. A terrifying and violent force wreaked havoc, and a crack was actually torn open in this primordial void. Behind the crack was a dazzling starlight, and the aura that came out clearly belonged to the Milky Way star domain. Before Yixian could react, the divine soul of the headless infant corpse had already turned into a blood-red light and rushed into the Milky Way star domain in the crack. Only a voice reverberated in Yixian's mind. Success! I'll go first and wait for you to come. At this moment, Yixian's body shook violently as if he had been struck by lightning. His entire body froze on the spot. His mouth was wide open, his eyes were wide, and even his breathing had stopped. His mind was buzzing, and he was completely stunned. Success? Go first and wait for me to come over? As this flashed through his mind, Yixian instantly understood. Everything that had happened just now was all fake. It was just a show put on by the headless infant corpse and the giant void tortoise, and their purpose was to send the headless infant corpse to the Milky Way star domain where the mother planet was located, which was now completely isolated by the invisible shield formed by the primordial void's nomological power. For this purpose, not only was the primeval heaven's eye tricked, but the heavenly path's vertical eye also shot out a green light beam, which turned into the power needed by the headless infant corpse. Even the primordial void's nomological power was fooled by the headless infant corpse and the giant void tortoise. The headless infant corpse had a purpose in wanting to end its karma with the primordial void. It wanted to use the massive amount of primordial void's nomological power to condense a heavenly path true body that belonged to itself. Immediately after, when the primeval heaven's eye attacked with all its might, the giant void tortoise that had been lying in wait by the side descended and added a claw at the critical moment. However, the full power of the primeval heaven's eye and the void tortoise was still unable to break through the invisible shield that enveloped the Milky Way. It was precisely because of this that the headless nascent soul abandoned the heavenly Tao true body he had just condensed and self-destructed at the last moment. He used the vast amount of primordial laws of chaos to forcefully tear apart the primordial void and break through the Milky Way shield to smoothly enter the Milky Way star field. All of this was similar to the scene that the primordial heavenly Tao's green eye, Xingbo, and his subordinates had joined forces to launch. 1 and only 31. The difference was that primeval heaven's eye and Xingbo were more ruthless. In order to send Xingbo to the Milky Way, they sacrificed all of Xingbo's followers. Now, only 2 of them were left, and their whereabouts were unknown. On the other hand, the headless nascent soul and the void tortoise did not suffer any losses. They merely settled their karma with the primordial void. They even made use of the primeval heaven's eye. This alone was very satisfying. Of course, although Xingbo and the headless nascent soul successfully entered the Milky Way star field one after another, Xingbo entered in his physical body, while the headless nascent soul entered in his godly soul state. There was obviously a difference between the two. However, Yixian could not judge to what extent the difference would be. This was because he did not even know what Xingbo and the headless nascent soul were scheming to enter the Milky Way star field to get close to the mother planet. What exactly were they scheming? In addition, before the godly soul of the headless nascent soul left, it secretly left a voice message in Yixian's mind. It said that it would leave first and wait for Yixian to go over. This made Yixian's heart surge with endless doubts again. Why? The headless nascent soul had succeeded. It had made use of the primeval heaven's eye and the primordial void to smoothly enter the Milky Way star field. If that was the case, why did it say such words? Why did it have to wait for him to enter the Milky Way star field and enter the mother planet? As these thoughts flashed through his mind, Yixian was stunned for a moment. His mind rumbled and his heart was in a mess. Although he had understood a lot, there seemed to be even more new questions that appeared, causing him to almost go crazy. Screech! Right at this moment, in the void in front of him, an extremely shrill scream suddenly sounded. Damn it! The headless nascent soul, the old tortoise. How dare you trick me? And you actually succeeded. Screech! Phew! At this moment, the primeval heaven's eyes scream sounded again, revealing endless resentment. It was infuriated. As the incarnation of the will of the heavenly way in the untainted land, it was played by the headless nascent soul and the void giant tortoise today. It was simply unbearable. In a rage, the huge green vertical eye in the void in the distance suddenly shot out two huge light beams from the pupil. In a flash, they came from the left and the right and went straight for Yixian and the void giant tortoise. This was clearly a furious attack and it wanted to kill. Boom! Rumble! Although it was only two light beams from the pupil, to the primeval heaven's eye, this was the wrath of the heavens. If it was in the void of the untainted land fragments, these two light beams would be no different from a terrifying heavenly punishment. Under the sudden bombardment, it was very likely that a part of the world would be destroyed. Even in the untainted land that it could not control, the terror of its power could not be underestimated. The two green light beams struck out separately, and the deep and thick untainted land trembled violently. A terrifying aura that seemed to be able to destroy the heavens and the earth was coming at them. At this moment, Yixian's heart once again felt an unprecedented sense of danger. This attack was not only far from the pupil light beam that the primeval heavens eye had shot at Yixian, it even vaguely surpassed the attack that it had just blasted at the headless nascent soul. After all, it was in anger, and the instantaneous explosive power could almost surpass its cultivation of the 8th level of the heavenly way. Stinking brat, do you want to die? Right at this moment, in the distance to the right, the void turtle's muffled voice came over. If you don't leave, then this old turtle will leave first. Hiss! As soon as he finished speaking, the sound of cloth tearing could be heard. The huge turtle claw retracted into the void crack and disappeared in an instant. This moment Yixian understood. Without any hesitation, while the primeval heaven's eye was distracted, he immediately issued an order to the devouring system in his body, fully activating the interstellar coordinate jump ability attached to the system, and immediately began to jump, swish. Almost in the next moment, an incomparably weak sound of breaking through the air rang out. The huge body of the ancient demon ape condensed into a small dot in the blink of an eye, and in less than a tenth of an instant, it had already disappeared completely in a flash. Not a single trace was left behind. And this time, the destination that Yixian had locked onto was none other than the base camp of the Source Nest planet, which was also located in the primeval void. Chapter 4908. Calculating the time, it had been dozens of years since Yixian left the primordial Chaos Star region's Origin Nest Star base camp. Before he left, he took out a large amount of purple gold medicine, 9-colored godly medicine, and chaos medicine. Of course, these 3 different levels of flesh medicine were obviously supplied to different people. The top-tier chaos medicine was only for Yixian's core subordinates, and those with higher levels of power. The 9-colored godly medicine and purple crystal medicine would be less valuable. In addition to these, Yixian also left behind a huge amount of other cultivation resources, as well as a portion of the various levels of precious pills in his hands. He gave all of these to Gui Hai Dao and instructed him to pass them to the old pig spirit after he came out of seclusion. Old pig demon distributed them. After that, Yixian chatted with his subordinates for a while before leaving the Origin Nest Star. In the blink of an eye, another few decades had passed. According to his calculations, the purple gold medicine, 9-colored godly medicine, chaos medicine, and various level pills he left on the Origin Nest Star should be almost used up. One of the reasons he decided to come to the Hongmeng Void this time was to take a look at the Source Nest Star's base camp and replenish some cultivation resources for his trusted subordinates in the base camp. And when he left a few decades ago, Flying Centipede and Silver G were already Emperor-level Undyings, and they weren't far from becoming Universe Knights. The 8 Vajra Gui Hai Dao, Song Qingyu Naibuishan Ba Chai Li Mosquitoes Wa Feng Tai, and the other leaders of the demon army were all emperors and late emperors. The other 20,000 demon warriors were all late emperors without exception. Other than that, there were already 9 universe masters among the space beasts in the 10 million beast army, and Old Pig Spirit had already reached the 9th stage of the universe master level. When Yi Xian left, he had just entered seclusion, and was about to break through to the universe supreme level. As for emperor-level undyings, there were thousands of them within the 10 million beast army. The rest were all at least normal undyings, and above it was definitely an elite beast army. All of this was decades ago. Now that so much time had passed, and the subordinates in the Source Nest Star had a huge supply of top-grade cultivation resources, and there were no other disturbances. All of their time could be used to cultivate in peace and improve at full speed. Obviously, the speed at which their cultivation base and strength increased was very fast. Even Yi Xian was looking forward to it. In the primordial star field where the origin nest star was located, Xiao, an imperceptible light appeared along with the sound of breaking through the air. It didn't stop and directly rushed to the source hive star in the void ahead. It was Yi Xian. At this moment, after successfully escaping the Great Desolate Heavenly Dao's green eye and successfully activating the interstellar coordinate jump ability of the system within his body, returning to the origin nest base camp in the primordial chaos void, Yi Xian, who was originally in his throat, completely relaxed. The surroundings of the Source Nest Star were still incomparably quiet. Even though they were very far away, Yi Xian's divine sense could still see that there were some fierce beasts and demons patrolling the surface of the Source Nest Star. This meant that everything was normal. In the dozens of years after he left, nothing unexpected had happened here. That would be enough. As he relaxed, Yi Xian transformed into a light and landed on the surface of the origin nest star. The patrolling demons and beasts immediately swarmed over, and they were all overjoyed. After some hustle and bustle, Yi Xian entered the first level of the life giant fortress. It was vast and there was no end in sight. At this moment, the news of his sudden return had been relayed by the patrolling teams on the surface of the star. After entering the interior of the star, large numbers of ferocious astral beasts swarmed over. All of them were extremely excited. Gue Hai Dao, Song Qingyu Mount Naibua, Ba Chai Li Mosquitoes Wa Fengtai, and other experts of the devil race were clearly among them, including the 8 great guardian deities, the flying centipede and old monster Silver G. They were all shooting over. Everyone was incomparably excited. After all this time, Yi Xian had been gone for quite some time. It had been several decades since he left. The 8 great guardian deities, flying centipede, old weirdo Silver G, Gue Hai Dao, and other trusted subordinates naturally had a good time with Yi Xian. As for their cultivation progress, Yi Xian was very satisfied. It could be said that after a few decades, all the trusted subordinates left in the Source Nest Star had an astonishing increase in strength. Now, Flying Centipede and Old Weirdo Silver G had become Universe Masters, and they were not far from becoming Universe Supreme Masters. As for the 8 great guardian deities, Gue Hai Dao, Song Qingyu Naibuashan Ba Chai Li Mosquitoes Wa Fengtai, and the other leaders of the demon army, they were all Universe Knights now, and they were at the late stage of this realm. They were not far from becoming Universe Masters. As for the 20,000 great beings under Gue Hai Dao and Song Qingyu, without exception, all of them had the battle power of a titled Undying Emperor. Although they were only at the initial stage, as long as they were provided with a large amount of cultivation resources, it would not be long before the entire army of 20,000 demon soldiers became Universe Knights. However, that still required time. However, no matter how long it took, it was worth it. A demon army of 20,000 Universe Knights was a battle power that excited Yi Xian just thinking about it. In fact, Yi Xian had always regarded this army of 20,000 demon soldiers under Gue Hai Dao and Song Qingyu as an elite trump card battle team. Now, it seemed that the results were amazing. However, since the end of the universe had not yet arrived, Yi Xian would not stop. Everything would continue. He also wanted to see how far this elite demon army, which had followed him since the beginning, could reach in the end. If the end of the universe arrived in the future, these 20,000 great beings of the demon army would all have the power of a Universe Supreme Master, and there would be some powerful beings of the Primordial Era Supreme Masters, and even late-stage Desolate Masters who were above level 7 as leaders and commanders. Then, this elite demon army would have a terrifying battle power that would make one's hair stand on end. In addition to the demon army, The space beasts and pig demons' 10 million ferocious beasts army had also made amazing progress in their cultivation. There were 7 powerful beings of the primordial era, but they were only at the initial stage. After all, when Yi Xian left, he left behind a few level 28 pills, and at that time there were already 9 universe masters in this ferocious beast army. After dozens of years there were 7 first-stage great beings, which was normal. Besides, there were more than 1,000 universe knights in the ferocious beast army, and the rest were all emperors or above. 10 million emperors, this was definitely an elite ferocious beast army. Chapter 4909. This time, although Yi Xian had not left the Hongmeng Void for a long time, only about 10 years, all the subordinates in the base camp of the Source Nest Star had been in closed-door cultivation. In the past 10 years, the star region where the Source Nest Star base camp was located was like a paradise that had been forgotten by the world. Without any disturbances, all the experts within the star region were able to calm down and use the various top-notch resources that Yi Xian had left behind before he left to raise their own cultivation with all their might. In addition, as the end of the Desolation era approached, the Primordial era was about to begin. The heaven and earth spirit chi in this primordial void had been continuously increasing. All these factors had led to a great increase in the strength of all the subordinates in the Source Nest Star. There were even 7 powerful figures from the remote antiquity era. In fact, although Old Pig Spirit was still in closed-door cultivation and Yi Xian did not see him when he arrived, Yi Xian already had an understanding of his cultivation strength from Gui Hai Dao and the others. That old guy had already stepped into the complete stage 9 of the remote antiquity era 3 years ago, which was the half-step desolate venerable realm. The reason why he had not broken through was that he did not have a level 29 desolate venerable pill. Otherwise, he would have become an extremely powerful desolate venerable 3 years ago. In the following 3 years, he had been in closed-door cultivation almost all the time. He would only come out for a few days occasionally. He looked extremely anxious and tried to break through on his own. However, he failed every time he tried to break through to the desolate venerable realm. Hearing this news, Yi Xian felt quite embarrassed. Speaking of which, he had dragged Old Pig Spirit down this time. Otherwise, if he had come back a few years earlier, Old Pig Spirit would have already stepped into the desolate venerable realm. In the current environment where the end of the world was about to arrive and the new Hongmeng era was about to begin, 3 years was very precious. If Old Pig Spirit had broken through to the desolate venerable realm 3 years ago, after 3 years of bitter cultivation, he might have even entered the middle desolate venerable realm of rank 4. After being separated for so many years, Yi Xian and the subordinates who stayed in the Source Nest Star naturally could not help but laugh and joke together. After 3 days, the subordinates gradually dispersed. Their mission was to improve their cultivation with all their strength. It was the same when Yi Xian was not around, and now that Yi Xian had returned it was the same. After the subordinates left, Yi Xian wandered around the star alone. In fact, this Source Hive star looked like a huge abandoned Source Hive star from the outside. But in fact, its insides had long been devoured. The surface of the planet was only about 1,000 miles long, and below that was the giant life fortress of the wild dragon ship. Yi Xian, Yi Xian. If needed, Xian could. If compared to the heavenly legacy beast that Di had created with the power of the entire heavenly legacy race, it was much larger. Of course, other than this star-like form, the wild dragon battleship could also transform into other forms as it was a living space battleship. For example, a vast continent in space, a battleship, or even a giant battle beast like the heavenly mystery beast would not be a problem at all. It was just that its speed was slower. After all, it was a living being and not an ice-cold machine. It could change in an instant once it started operating its internal machinery. Although the wild dragon battleship was not in its largest state, the size of a giant nesting star was not small. Now the interior of the star had become the internal space of the wild dragon battleship. Naturally, it was impossible for there to be only one layer. In fact, the elite demonkin army and the 10 million beast army were on different floors of the ship. Only the pig spirit, Gui Hai Dao, and the other upper echelons could enter the top floor of the command cabin. Currently, the pig spirit was in seclusion in a secret room in the command cabin on the top floor. Although it was called a secret room, there was actually another world inside. There were mountains and rivers, and it was incomparably vast. Yixian also came to the top floor of the Wild Dragon battleship after taking a look around. However, he did not immediately wake the pig spirit up in case something unexpected happened. He was on the top floor of the command cabin. He sat cross-legged on the peak of the mountain and did not cultivate. Instead, he waited for the pig spirit while thinking about the arrival of the primeval Heaven's Eye. The infant corpse and the void tortoise had conspired to use the primeval Heaven's Eye and the power of the primordial void law to smoothly enter the Milky Way star sector. There was no doubt that this matter was extremely beneficial to the headless infant corpse, the void tortoise, and the others as well as Yixian. Yixian still did not understand why they were in such a hurry to enter the Milky Way star sector, which was still protected by the power of the primordial void law, and used this opportunity to get close to the mother planet. However, Yixian at least understood one thing, and that was that entering the mother planet was extremely important for obtaining the luck of the next primordial void era. For this reason, the headless infant corpse, the primeval Heaven's Eye, and Xingbo were all making arrangements. Furthermore, both sides had made small gains. Previously, only Xingbo, who was in cahoots with the primeval Heaven's Eye, had entered the Milky Way star sector. This made Yixian uneasy, and it was obviously not a good thing for the headless infant corpse either. At that time, the headless infant corpse had also witnessed this scene with his own eyes. After all, without his ability to conceal Yixian's aura, he would have been exposed at that time. Perhaps after that incident, the headless infant corpse became anxious, and used some unknown method to secretly communicate with the void tortoise. It took a long time to set up this trap, and in the end it succeeded in one fell swoop. Not only had the power of the primordial void law been used for all of this, but the primeval Heaven's Eye had also been miserably schemed against. Even Yixian had been kept in the dark all this time. Although the headless infant corpse and the void tortoise had not schemed against him, during this period of time, the headless infant corpse was still in the state of a corpse lamp tattoo, hibernating on the left side of Yixian's chest, just like before. Yixian had been completely unaware of his various arrangements. If this were to happen to anyone, they would probably not feel good. It was the same for Yixian as well. However, that incident was already in the past. Not to mention the headless infant corpse and the void tortoise, Yixian could not deduce anything more based on the clues he had at hand. Moreover, even though he was unhappy, the headless infant corpse had already left after this incident and was no longer hibernating in his body. Therefore, there was no need for Yixian to dwell on this matter at all. However, apart from this matter, there was still an existence similar to the headless infant corpse in his body, and that was the devouring system. This thing had helped Yixian a lot in the early and middle stages of his life. It could be said that without it, there would not be the current Yixian. However, until now, Yixian still could not figure it out. After this incident with the headless infant corpse, he immediately became vigilant. Now that he was deep in thought, he was considering the possibility of removing the devouring system from his body. Chapter 49:10. This time, after experiencing the headless infant corpse's plot, Yixian immediately became vigilant. He thought of the devouring system in his body. It could be said that the devouring system had helped Yixian a lot during the early and middle stages of his growth. Without it, there would be no Yixian today. But until now, Yixian still couldn't figure it out. Now that old pig spirit had yet to come out of seclusion, Yixian thought of the devouring system in his body from the headless infant corpse's plot. Unknowingly, he fell into deep thought, thinking of the possibility of removing it from his body. In fact, it wasn't that Yixian hadn't thought about this before. Back when he saw Xingbo in the depths of the blood mosquito forbidden grounds in the primordial chaos void, and knew that he was still alive, Yixian realized that something was amiss. He had a strong suspicion of the devouring system in his body. The devouring system was developed by D-Air. The system was said to select the best among the countless humans in the vast sea of stars. As for what the final result of the selection would be, it wasn't clearly stated. Previously, Yixian didn't think too much about it. Perhaps it was because his level wasn't high enough and he hadn't reached such a high level. But later, with Xingbo's appearance, he realized that D-Air and D were most likely in cahoots with Xingbo. Then the devouring system was naturally not safe. Unfortunately, after realizing this, no matter how hard Yixian searched his body, he couldn't find the devouring system's dormant location. It was as if it didn't exist at all. Since then, although Yixian had temporarily put this matter to the back of his mind, he had always felt a heavy weight in his heart. He didn't dare say that it had become a knot in his heart, but it was probably not far from it. Later on, Air had used the power of the entire machinery race to fuse together and failed in his attempt to break through to the heavenly Tao realm. He had been mercilessly suppressed by primeval Heaven's Eye, but D had gone easy on him and had successfully entered the true heavenly Tao realm. From this matter, Yixian realized that D was most likely in cahoots with Xingbo and primeval Heaven's Eye. On the other hand, Air, who was originally full of doubts, was most likely not so. As for the devouring system, it was created by Air and spread throughout the vast sea of stars. If that was the case, Yixian's heart immediately calmed down. Although Air was also very mysterious, he could not be compared to Xingbo and primeval Heaven's Eye. If he wasn't in cahoots with these three parties, then even if he tampered with the devouring system and really had some sort of scheme, it wouldn't be a good thing for Yixian, but at least it wouldn't be too serious. However, this was just a guess. There was no way that Yixian would be paralyzed by this. Previously, he had not been able to find the hiding place of the devouring system in his body. Since he could not find it, he had no choice but to temporarily put it aside. However, after entering the primordial void this time, Yixian had activated the devil ape bloodline in his body and used the 9 transformations of the devil ape to the 9th transformation. After his cultivation had reached the 2nd level of the heavenly Tao realm, everything changed. At that time, Yixian had relied on the bloodline power of the 9 transformations of the demonic ape to successfully step into the heavenly Tao realm. Moreover, he was at the 2nd level of the heavenly Tao realm. Moreover, after entering this realm, Yixian instantly felt a layer of membrane appear in the surrounding space. He couldn't touch it before, but now it was extremely clear. This was the power of the heavenly Tao. Although he had only temporarily touched it with the bloodline ability of the 9 transformations of the demonic ape, it had an incomparably great significance to Yixian. This was because in that instant, he instantly gained all sorts of comprehensions, and the lights in his mind flashed one after another without end. Even the devouring system in his body, which he had always been unable to fathom, seemed to have gained some unknown insight at that moment. It was too complicated and obscure. He needed time to deduce and explore before he could understand. It could be said that at that moment, he felt as if he had been enlightened. Everything was incomparably mysterious. It was only after he had come into contact with the power of the heavenly Tao realm that he was able to understand later on, when he activated the interstellar coordinate jump ability of the devouring system in his body and instantly returned to the vicinity of the source nest star. Yixian immediately withdrew from the 9 transformations of the devil ape bloodline state. From then on, his cultivation was only at the 2nd level of the supreme primordial realm. He did this for the sake of caution. He didn't want the primeval Heaven's Eye to sense the aura of a heavenly Tao realm expert and track him down. But now, he had already entered the interior of the Source Hive Star. The Source Hive Star was originally a place used by the Hongmeng Void to nurture Chaos Fiend Celestials. Even though it had been abandoned, it still possessed a certain degree of isolation power. Otherwise, the Source Hive Star's surface would have been swallowed up by the Long Yi Hao's life giant plug. Without the isolation power, the abnormalities would have been discovered long ago. In addition to the isolation force of the Long Yixian's life fortress, Yixian deliberately restrained his aura. This way, even if he entered the 9th transformation of the 9 transformations of the Devil Ape bloodline, he wouldn't have to worry about his aura leaking out and being detected by the primeval Heaven's Eye. Thinking of this, he no longer hesitated. With a flash of light in his eyes, he entered the 9th transformation in an instant. At this moment his cultivation soared, and he directly entered the 2nd level of the heavenly Tao realm from the 2nd level of the supreme primordial realm. However, he still maintained his height, and his terrifying aura didn't leak out. At the same time, Yixian's consciousness entered his sea of consciousness. After a round of exploration, he found a rhombus-shaped crystal in the depths of his sea of consciousness. It was only the size of a pigeon's egg, but it exuded an incomparably mysterious aura. This crystal was the devouring system. When it first met Yixian and merged with his body, it had been hibernating in the depths of his sea of consciousness. Even when Yixian's cultivation had reached the 9th level of the supreme primordial realm, he still couldn't find it. Now that his cultivation had reached the second level of the heavenly Tao realm under the 9th transformation of the devil ape, he easily dug it out. Just from this point alone, one could see how powerful and terrifying the heavenly Tao realm was. Xiao! An incomparably weak sound of something breaking through the air rang out. Following Yixian's thought, this blue translucent crystal that was only the size of a pigeon's egg instantly turned into a ray of light and shot out from the depths of his sea of consciousness at an extremely fast speed. After rushing out of the sea of consciousness, it came to an abrupt stop. It floated about 10,000 li above the sea and slowly rotated, emitting an inexplicable mysterious aura. Finally found it. After a while, Yixian's spiritual sense retreated. On the face of the body condensed from his consciousness, there was a trace of disappointment that couldn't be dispersed. Chapter 49:11. After a short period of investigation, the divine sense that Yixian had extended into the crystal representing the devouring system retreated. On the face of the body that was condensed from his own consciousness, there was a trace of disappointment that was so thick that it couldn't be dispersed. It was rapidly appearing. Nothing. The present Yixian's divine sense was extremely terrifying. He was a true existence at the second level of the heavenly Tao realm. But even so, Yixian did not discover anything even after probing with all his might for half an hour. From the looks of it, this was an extremely pure crystal. It was like the purest crystal. There was nothing inside, and he could not even detect any energy fluctuations. But in fact it was emitting an extremely mysterious aura. This aura could not have appeared out of thin air. But inside and outside the crystal, there was indeed no trace of it. This made Yixian's heart sink. Even with the divine sense of a second-level heavenly Tao realm expert, he could not find any trace of it? How could an existence at this level be something that old fellow D-Air could create? At this moment Yixian's doubts arose again. He was suspicious of D-Air again, however. Although he could not find any trace of it for the time being, it was not impossible for Yixian to separate the devouring system from his body. Although he did not find any clues, one thing he was certain of was that this crystal was indeed the devouring system. If he wanted to remove the system from his body, he could just take this crystal out of his sea of consciousness and throw it as far away as he could. Thinking of this, Yixian's heart immediately palpitated with excitement. Previously, when the headless infant corpse set up the trap, he felt a huge threat. He also realized that the devouring system in his body was very likely to be a ticking time bomb. And the severity of the situation was definitely different from the headless infant corpse's significance to Yixian. Although the headless infant corpse was also suspicious, the possibility of it harming Yixian was not high. But the devouring system was different. Its existence itself had a very strong purpose. The possibility of it causing harm to Yixian was almost boundless, however. If he were to take this mysterious crystal out of his sea of consciousness and throw it far away, he would be able to completely separate the devouring system from his body. To Yixian it would be a terrible loss. But it was also somewhat shocking. With Yixian's current level, the system's other abilities were almost meaningless. Everything that the system's abilities could do, Yixian could do by himself. Even the treasures in the exchange shop did not catch Yixian's eyes. Ever since he entered the primordial void, his growth had been too fast. He had obtained too many treasures. Whether it was the quantity, level, or the quality, they were all infuriating him. There was only one thing that Yixian could not bear to part with, and that was the system's interstellar coordinate jump ability. Even now, Yixian was in the 9th transformation of the 9 transformations of the demonic ape. He had the terrifying cultivation level of a true heavenly Tao realm stage 2. But it was still far from being able to achieve the same effect as the interstellar coordinate jump ability. For example, previously, he had successfully escaped from the primeval Heaven's Eye because he had activated the system's interstellar coordinate jump ability. The primeval Heaven's Eye was a true heavenly Tao realm stage 8 expert. After Yixian used this ability to escape, it still did not give chase. It was obvious that it did not catch any trace of him. Just based on this point, it was enough to prove how powerful the interstellar coordinate jump ability was. Not to mention, Yixian currently had more than one interstellar coordinate jump point imprinted in the primordial chaos void, the 3 main planes of the starry sky, and the main fragment of the great desolate world where the demon palace was located. These areas were very far apart. Even a heavenly Tao realm existence could not reach them instantly. But as long as they were in the same void or between two adjacent voids, Yixian could travel between the imprinted interstellar coordinate jump ability at will and instantly. Even at his current height and level, this ability was still very tempting. If he were to give it up just like that, it would really hurt. However, from this point of view, the devouring system is even more suspicious. Even a true heavenly Tao realm stage 8 expert like the primeval heavens I might not be able to do this. How could the devouring system created by D-Air have such a heaven-defying ability? As he muttered to himself, a cold light flashed in Yixian's eyes. He immediately made a decision. Forget it. I'll leave this crystal in my sea of consciousness for the time being. I'll just monitor it closely at all times. In the future, when my cultivation reaches the true heavenly Tao realm, I'll use the 9 transformations of the demonic 8 bloodline ability. My strongest cultivation will probably reach the peak of stage 9 of the heavenly Tao realm. When that happens, I'll investigate this crystal again. If there are any results, I'll make a decision based on the results. If there are still no results with my cultivation strength at that time, my dependence on the system's interstellar coordinate jump ability will definitely decrease. I dare not say that it will become dispensable, but even if I give it up, the impact on me will be minimized. When that happens, I won't feel as pained and conflicted as I am now. With this thought in mind, Yixian heaved a sigh of relief. With a thought, the green translucent crystal floating above his sea of consciousness slowly descended and entered his sea of consciousness. But this time, Yixian enveloped the surface of the crystal with a layer of his consciousness. As such, even if he was released from the 9 transformations of the demonic ape, and no longer possessed a true heavenly Tao realm cultivation, he would still be able to sense the location of the crystal in his sea of consciousness at any time. As such, the crystal would be under Yixian's close surveillance at all times. No matter how mysterious and shocking its origins were, it would probably be very difficult for it to cause any substantial harm to Yixian. With Yixian's present cultivation level, even if the crystal mutated and the devouring system suddenly attacked, he would still have certain means to deal with it. After everything was done, Yixian's consciousness exited his sea of consciousness. After returning to his body, his physical body instantly opened its eyes. Rumble. Roar. This can't be an illusion, right? I can actually sense that little bastard's aura. Is this the rhythm of him finally returning? Mother***, you've really screwed me over this time. Almost at the next instant, in the secret chamber where Old Pig's spirit was in seclusion, there was suddenly an earth-shattering rumble of thunder. Following that, there was an earth-shattering roar of a beast. Old Pig Spirit's roar was raging endlessly. Clearly, Old Pig Spirit, who had been in seclusion all this time, had finally awoken. He immediately sensed Yixian's aura and was overjoyed, which was why he let out such an earth-shattering roar. However, this old fellow had clearly gotten a little carried away. He had been calling Yixian boss previously, but now he had become a little bastard. Although it was due to his deep resentment, it was still too disrespectful. Yixian snorted coldly and his expression instantly turned sullen. Chapter 49:12. By the side, in the chamber where Pig's spirit was in seclusion, there was an earth-shattering rumble of thunder. Pig's spirit, who had been in seclusion all this time, had finally awakened. He immediately sensed Yixian's aura. In his joy, he let out such an earth-shattering roar. However, the old bastard had clearly gotten carried away. He had been calling Yixian boss previously, but now he was calling him little bastard. Yixian snorted coldly as his expression instantly turned sullen. Rumble. Phew! In the next moment, a rumbling sound rang out. The giant door of the secret room that was made of starry sky alloy slowly opened, and a ray of light shot out from within. Its speed was too fast, and in the blink of an eye, it was already 300 meters away from Yixian and abruptly stopped. Who else could it be but Pig Spirit? Little bastard, it's really you. You finally know to come back? Mother***, I've been screwed over by you this time. Upon seeing Yixian, a glint flashed in Pig Spirit's eyes. His face instantly revealed a look of anger as the aura in his body surged incessantly. It gave off a feeling of overwhelming rage. However, halfway through his sentence, the old bastard finally thought of sensing Yixian's cultivation aura. It would have been fine if he did not probe, but once he did, his expression instantly froze. The words he was saying came to a halt as his eyes nearly popped out of their sockets. He looked as though he had seen a ghost and even subconsciously shrank his neck. His voice instantly weakened by an octave and he began to stutter. This, old pig, am I hallucinating? Heavenly Dao Realm? Boss, you actually stepped into the Heavenly Dao Realm? Could it be that you have even refined a level 30 Heavenly Dao treasure pill? Ayaya. It's no wonder you were delayed for more than 10 years before returning. You must have refined a level 29 Desolate Supremacy treasure pill and used it to break through to the Desolate Supremacy realm. Then you continued to work hard, hunting supremes of the primordial era everywhere, until you refined a level 30 Heavenly Dao treasure pill. You felt that you had the face to return to us old pals before rushing back. Boss, you've worked hard. Old pig missed you so much. At the end of his speech, the old man shamelessly spread his forepaws and leaped into the air, wanting to give Yixian a bear hug. His eyes were filled with tears of excitement, to be precise. This was most likely because of the fact that he was about to get the level 29 Desolate Supreme treasure pill and level 30 Heavenly Path treasure pill. He was so excited that he could not control himself. Bang! Get lost. Yixian had no intention of being polite at all. He pulled a long face and directly stepped over. With a loud bang, the old man's round body was sent flying tens of thousands of miles away in an instant. This was clearly done on purpose. He was trying to curry favor and make a scene. Seeing that Yixian didn't pay attention to him, the old fellow flipped over and ran over with his four hooves raised. He was clearly a big black pig, but now he was swinging his tail even more coquettishly than a dog. His long nose was constantly sniffing around Yixian's body, and when he looked at him coldly, he really was no different from a dog. Stop sniffing. My current cultivation strength of level 2 Heavenly Dao Realm can only be achieved in the state of 9 Devil Ape transformation. As for my own cultivation strength, I am only at level 1 Primordial Era Supreme. I just broke through not long ago. The so-called level 30 Heavenly Dao treasure pill, I don't even have the materials, how can I refine it? Rolling his eyes, Yixian finished speaking and immediately waved his hand. In an instant, a small jade bottle shot out and directly landed in Old Pig's hand. This small bottle contained a level 29 Desolate Supremacy treasure pill. It had been 3 years since Old Pig stepped into the Primordial Era Supreme Perfection stage. Moreover, he had tried to break through several bottlenecks. After swallowing this pill, it would take at most 3 days for him to welcome the Desolate Supremacy tribulation and step into the Primordial Era Supreme Perfection stage. In addition to that, Yixian had also given him a large pot of chaos medicine that was over 3 million feet long. It was like an enormous mountain range. He had refined a lot of it last time, so he still had a lot of it in his hands. Old Pig was about to become the Primordial Era Supreme Perfection stage. Although the 9-colored divine medicine had extraordinary effects on him, in Yixian's opinion, it was naturally better to use the chaos herbs. With such a large number of chaos herbs, even if Old Pig successfully broke through and stepped into the Primordial Era Supreme Perfection stage, it would be enough for him to use for a period of time. At least, before he entered the Primordial Era Supreme Perfection stage, he wouldn't be so thick-skinned as to ask for resources from Yixian. Level 29 Desolate Supremacy treasure pill? And there were so many herbs of chaos? Big brother, I love you so much. Seeing the small jade bottle that was shot out, the Old Pig spirit's eyes instantly emitted a green light, as he used his divine sense to probe the storage magic treasure that contained the million-foot-long primordial chaos medicine. With a flip of his hooves, he put it away, pouted, and gave Yixian a bear hug. This was clearly the rhythm of asking for a kiss. The old guy's problem of being complacent was getting worse and worse. He was simply shameless to the extent of having no bottom line. Bang! Get within 10 feet of me again, he said. I'm going to use underhanded means. Thinking of his disgusting pig mouth, Yixian had goosebumps all over his body. He glared at Old Pig and gave him a fierce warning on the spot. The kick sent the old pig demon thousands of miles away again, but the old man was not hurt at all. He still rushed over with a grin on his face, but he did not dare to come any closer. Instead, he stopped abruptly 100 feet away from Wu Qi. After playing for a while, Yixian suddenly thought of something. His eyes flashed and he suddenly said, By the way, how many changes are your 9 transformations of demonic pig? You can't have been trying to break through to the primordial era for the next 3 years, right? There must be no result. If I were you, I would use the time to deduce the 9 transformations of demonic pig. At the end of his sentence, Yixian spread out his hands with a helpless expression. Of course you're a pig, so you might have a different choice. There's nothing I can do about it. After all, I can understand your innate talent. Roar. A woo. Old Pig was instantly angry. He raised his head and roared. You are obviously calling me stupid in a roundabout way. Duel, we must duel. Roundabout way? I'm sorry, it was a slip of the tongue. Actually, I didn't want a roundabout way. Let me change my words. You are a pig, you are stupid. You wasted 3 years for nothing. Do you think this will work? While speaking, Yixian rolled his eyes and rubbed his wrists. He sneered. Also, I heard you say something about a duel and you must… Are you sure? I was just joking. Old Pig immediately became dejected. He lowered his head and looked at Yixian bitterly. But I didn't waste all 3 years. At most, I only used half of it. I used the remaining 1.5 years to deduce the 9 transformations of demonic pig. Now I have already deduced the 7th transformation of the 9 transformations of demonic pig. If I successfully break through this time and officially enter the primordial era, once I activate the 9 transformations of demonic pig, I will instantly become a 2nd stage primordial era. After using the 7th transformation, won't I immediately become a 9th stage primordial era? At the end of his words, the old guy's eyes turned green. He raised his head and roared excitedly. A woo! Chapter 49:13. 7th transformation? Yixian was stunned for a moment before a strange expression appeared on his face. I'm also at the 1st level of the Desolate Sovereign. You old fellow, you're about to step into this realm as well. In addition, the 9 transformations' divine abilities have already reached the 7th transformation. If that's the case, the difference between us is only 2 small ranks. Seems that I have to work harder. Otherwise, if I want to bully you again, I'm afraid it won't be so easy in the future. Hearing this, the old pig's spirit rolled his eyes and gritted his teeth. However, his face was filled with smiles. As he spoke, he wanted to move closer to Yixian. Boss, why would you bully me, the old pig? We are good brothers. Bang! Don't give me that. Yixian also rolled his eyes. Without the slightest bit of politeness, he directly raised his foot and kicked the old fellow flying. Before he left, he didn't forget to remind him. Remember, after you break through, don't spread out your cultivation before you leave the secret room. At that time, I'll cover it up for you, and you should be able to avoid the detection of the primordial void's aura. In the past 10 years, the desolate supremacy old monsters on both sides of the Milky Way have been hiding their heads like turtles, afraid that the old bastard will hunt them down. We are going to refine a level 30 heavenly path treasure pill, and the raw materials are 5 desolate supremacy blood essences. Now that you have broken through to the desolate supremacy realm, there will definitely be a desolate supremacy tribulation. At that time, you can go to the right bank of the Milky Way to undergo the tribulation. Hopefully, you can attract 1 or 2 desolate supremacy old monsters. Yes, boss, you are smart. You can even think of this. As soon as the old pig spirit heard about the level 30 heavenly path treasure pill, his eyes lit up again. Without hesitation, he rushed into the secret room where he had been in seclusion before he finished his words. Rumble. As the old pig's figure disappeared from the secret room, the giant door of the secret room made of starry sky alloy also closed. There was no sound coming from inside. The old pig should have swallowed the level 29 desolate supremacy treasure pill that was given to him just now and had entered a state of seclusion. Yixian didn't leave because if nothing unexpected happened, pig spirit's seclusion would end in 3 days at most. This time, the reason why he asked the old pig spirit not to reveal his aura after breaking through was to prevent him from being punished by the desolate supremacy thunder tribulation on the spot. Instead, he would go to the left bank of the Milky Way and undergo the tribulation there. His goal was not only to attract 1 or 2 desolate honorable starry sky beasts, but also to attract the giant void tortoise. This time, the headless infant corpse and the giant void tortoise had worked together to set up a trap. Although the target was the primeval heaven's eye, Yixian had been kept in the dark. Now, the primeval heavens, I had successfully entered the Milky Way starfield and achieved its goal. The void tortoise had successfully retreated and escaped the pursuit of the primeval heavens. The two of them were satisfied, but Yi Xian was depressed. Until now, he still had no idea what their goal was. This really pissed him off. Of course, if they deliberately looked for the void tortoise that had been in hibernation for a long time, it was completely unnecessary. However, now, taking the opportunity to lure the void tortoise out while trapping one or two desolate supremacy beasts, Yi Xian naturally wouldn't miss this opportunity. That guy was still thinking about Yi Xian's level 30 heavenly elixir, and had been hunting desolate honorable starry sky beasts. He didn't know how many heavenly elixirs he had, but he was sure that it was definitely less than 5. If that was the case, when the old pig spirit suddenly underwent his desolate supremacy tribulation at the right bank of the Milky Way, the void tortoise that was in hibernation would definitely not be able to hold back and would most likely appear. Of course, this matter couldn't be known to the old pig spirit. It was fine if it only attracted one or two desolate supremacy old monsters that came from a forbidden land on the right bank of the Milky Way out of curiosity. If he knew that the void tortoise would also descend, and its goal was to kill a desolate supremacy, he would probably be scared to death. The void tortoise was not an ordinary desolate Zune old monster. His half-step heavenly Tao realm cultivation base was already extremely terrifying. In addition, he was a super old monster that had lived from the beginning of the Great Desolate Era to the present. Even an expert at the level of the old pig spirit had the impression that the void tortoise was definitely a legendary existence. Once he knew that he was being used as bait by Yi Xian, not only did he want to bait such a terrifying existence, but the other party's goal was to kill him and refine the desolate supremacy blood essence. With the old pig spirit's temperament, he would probably get angry with Yi Xian on the spot. 3 days passed in a flash. Yi Xian's guess was correct. This time, the old pig spirit's seclusion time was exactly 3 days. Rumble. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, Yi Xian was meditating at the peak of a giant mountain on the top deck of the Long Yi ship. The giant alloy door of the secret chamber below suddenly moved, and an earth-shattering rumbling sound was heard. Xiu! As the giant alloy door opened, a ray of light shot out and stopped abruptly in front of the open space. It was the old pig spirit. At this time, although he appeared in his original form, his body had shrunk to only a few feet. A dark red color could faintly be seen on his black body. This was clearly him forcefully suppressing the aura in his body and not letting it leak out. Boss, you have to move faster. Otherwise, this old pig can't guarantee that I won't explode from holding it in. Raising his head to look at Yi Xian, this old fellow had a constipated expression and was extremely depressed. Can't you see that this body has become round? At least it's a lot fatter. If this drags on for too long, I'll really explode from holding it in. At this moment, the old pig spirit's body was indeed filled with air. It was as if he was about to be scalded and shaved. Yi Xian almost couldn't hold back his laughter. However, this old fellow was right. Looking at him like this, he really couldn't hold it in for too long. Xiu. Thinking of this, Yi Xian's eyes flashed. Without hesitation, he waved his hand and directly sent the old pig spirit into the Shenong cauldron. At this time, Yi Xian had also been released from the 9th transformation of the 9 transformations Devil Ape. However, the Devil Ape bloodline was still in the midst of being activated. Therefore, the aura emitted from his body was actually that of a second-order Desolate Ancient Venerable. Moreover, even if he was a second-order Desolate Ancient Venerable, he deliberately suppressed his aura and activated the spiritual force source core that was suspended above his sea of consciousness. With the spiritual force of a demon, he displayed a perfect spiritual force secret technique, perfectly concealing his figure and aura. After doing all this, Yi Xian's figure, which had been hidden for a long time, disappeared instantly and appeared directly in the cosmic void outside the Source Nest star. Then, with a flash of his figure, he immediately displayed his extreme speed and shot toward the right bank of the Milky Way in the distance. In this mysterious and dark primordial void, Yi Xian only imprinted a total of 2 interstellar coordinate jump points. One was near the Source Nest star's base camp, and the other was near the Source Nest star that nurtured his strongest avatar. He had never used the imprint of the last interstellar coordinate jump point, so now that he was rushing to the right bank of the Milky Way, he could only cross the void. Chapter 49:14. Even if Yixian had only activated the ancient ape demon's bloodline and had not entered the state of the ninth transformation, he still had the terrifying strength of a second-order desolate master, so his speed was naturally very fast. In just one day he had arrived at the right bank of the Milky Way, but he did not approach the remnant star fields and the fierce beast forbidden grounds on the right bank, because that would be too obvious and would arouse suspicion. He stopped in the void tens of billions of miles away from the right bank of the Milky Way, and after searching for a while, he determined the most suitable star field. There were many abandoned stars in this area, and it was the best place to set up an ambush. Whoosh! With a wave of his hand, a ray of light shot out and the old pig spirit was released from the Shenong cauldron by Yixian. It had only been a day, but this fellow's body had become even fatter. His entire body was suffocated to the point of being purple. Yixian almost laughed out loud when he saw this, but this fellow just rolled his eyes. It was unknown whether he was angry or suffocated. Alright, this is the place. You can slowly release your aura now. Remember, don't be too fast. Otherwise, you'll leave before the fish take the bait. After saying a few words to the old pig spirit, Yixian's figure flickered and disappeared into the distance. He entered the depths of an abandoned star, and perfectly concealed his figure and aura with a perfect vibration of spiritual power. He was only more than 10 billion miles away from where the old pig spirit was. As long as it was necessary, he could arrive at any time in an instant. A woo! Boom! Rumble! The pig demon raised his head and let out an earth-shattering roar, revealing an endless amount of anger. In an instant, there was a thunderous roar that shook the heavens and earth as a large amount of black clouds of catastrophe surged forth. When he raised his head to look over, he saw dense and pitch-black tribulation clouds gathering at a speed visible to the naked eye. In less than half a breath of time, an area of over 100 million kilometers in circumference had already been completely covered by pitch-black tribulation clouds. At this moment, the supreme ancient aura in the pig spirit's body had already been sensed by the power of the primordial void. Naturally, a lightning tribulation would descend. This was the desolate sovereign tribulation that belonged to him. After waiting for so many years, old pig's desolate supremacy tribulation is finally coming. A woo! Rumble! As more of the old pig spirit's aura spread out from his body, he raised his head and let out a roar. The tribulation clouds in the sky gathered even faster, and in the blink of an eye, they had already covered a radius of 1 billion kilometers. The sudden appearance of this terrifying tribulation cloud could be sensed from hundreds of billions of miles away, let alone tens of billions of miles away. In the distant right bank of the Milky Way, the various remnant star fields and forbidden lands were already in an uproar. A large number of star fields and forbidden lands upper echelons all walked out of their seclusion grounds with bewildered looks on their faces. Soon, a large number of figures rushed out from various star regions and forbidden lands and gathered in this place. Their cultivation level was at least above the normal immortal level, but the strongest were only some of the desolate era almighty beings. Ever since the giant void tortoise killed a few desolate supremes, all the desolate supremes in the remnant star field and the desolate beast forbidden lands on the right bank of the Milky Way went into hiding, not daring to show themselves. In just a short time, a large number of remnant star experts and beast experts from the right bank of the Milky Way had gathered in the void 20 billion kilometers away from the abandoned star field. There were too many of them, densely packed and overwhelming. After all, this was the desolate sovereign tribulation. Even in the primordial void, it was not something that could be seen casually. Witnessing a quasi-desolate sovereign tribulation with one's own eyes was an indescribable benefit. As long as one had the strength to ensure one's safety from a distance, one would not want to miss such an opportunity. Since the start of the meal, old pig spirit had been slowly releasing the aura and power in his body. Now he finally could not hold on any longer. In addition, in the surrounding void 20 billion kilometers away, a large number of remnant people and beast experts had already gathered. The news had spread, and the commotion was not small. If there was a desolate sovereign coming, it would be soon. Thinking of this, old pig spirit raised his head and let out a long howl, a woo, rumble. As if in response, the vast tribulation cloud that covered a radius of 1 billion kilometers above his head also let out a shocking roar at this moment. After all, this was the desolate sovereign tribulation, and its power was not to be underestimated. Hence, The number of tribulation clouds was so large that it made one's hair stand on end. With Old Pig's spirit's last howl, the dense tribulation clouds that had gathered in the sky suddenly increased in size. Rumble. Gotcha! At this moment, the tribulation clouds that had gathered above them were dense to the point they were pitch black like ink, and they enveloped an area of almost 5 billion kilometers. It was an astounding sight. Moreover, a bolt of violet gold lightning descended at the first possible moment amidst rumbling that shook the heavens and the earth. This bolt of tribulation lightning was too thick, and it was almost 3 kilometers long. Based on its might, even an ordinary star would be slashed apart with a single strike of this lightning. Although it could not be compared to the tribulation lightning bolt that Yi Xian had experienced before, it was not too far off, at least about 70% of its power. In the distance, a large number of remnant people and beast experts from various star fields and forbidden areas had gathered. They had been quietly lying in wait, but now they were alarmed by this extremely dense tribulation cloud that shrouded the area, and all of them became vigilant. Without any hesitation, they immediately scattered in all directions, retreating more than 10 billion kilometers away before stopping one after another. The power of the tribulation lightning was too amazing, and its power was monstrous. Only by escaping so far away could they feel a little sense of security. They were afraid that if they stayed too close they would be implicated. Roar! Regarding everything around him, Old Pig's spirit did not take it to heart and completely ignored it. At this moment, his entire mind was attracted by the first wave of tribulation lightning that fell from the sky. As he raised his head and roared, his entire body shot up into the sky at this moment. With a flash of black light, Old Pig's spirit's body was instantly enveloped by an overwhelming sea of purple lightning. Yi Xian was not worried about this at all. This old guy had a rough skin and had entered the peak of the desolation stage for a long time. He had a deep foundation, so it was absolutely impossible for him to not be able to withstand these 3 waves of tribulation lightning. At this time Yi Xian's thoughts were all in the surrounding void, paying close attention to other changes. His goal was only the beast desolate venerable, and the most likely appearance of the void giant tortoise. Whoosh! Whoosh whoosh! At this moment, from 3 different directions in the distance, 3 faint sounds of breaking through the air suddenly sounded. Among the dense crowd of experts, 3 figures rushed out at this moment, at an extremely fast speed, heading straight for Old Pig's spirit. Although they deliberately concealed their aura, Yi Xian was also a desolate venerable expert, so he keenly captured a trace of desolate venerable aura from them. Good heavens, I didn't expect that there would be 3 of them at once. Chapter 49:15. What made Yi Xian even more delighted was that the 3 desolate supremes that suddenly appeared emitted a rich aura of ferocious beasts. In other words, they were all space ferocious beasts, and not primordial survivors. This was truly a pleasant surprise. If he could kill all 3 desolate supremacy ferocious beasts, it was no different from instantly obtaining 3 desolate supremacy blood essences. On this point Yi Xian was very confident. This was because he had long sensed that the 3 desolate supremes were only at the 2nd or 3rd stage. If Yi Xian entered the 9th transformation of the 9 Devil Ape transformations bloodline divine power, even if his body remained at a height of 10 feet, he would be able to instantly possess the combat strength of the 2nd stage of the Heavenly Tao realm, even if he gave up on the augmentation of his massive body of 60 million kilometers. If he was caught off guard, killing the 3 early stage desolate supremes would be like child's play. In fact, the 3 desolate supremes that unexpectedly appeared were all space ferocious beasts. This was to be expected. Space ferocious beasts would devour each other to increase their cultivation level and bloodline. Old Pig's spirit was also a desolate supremacy. Now, he was undergoing a tribulation, and before he completed his tribulation he was a quasi-desolate supremacy. A quasi-desolate supremacy was not considered a true desolate supremacy, but the lifeblood in his body was no different from a true desolate supremacy. However, there was a difference in combat strength. Therefore, the 3 desolate supremacy ferocious beasts chose this moment to attack. Once they successfully devoured Old Pig's spirit, it was no different from devouring a desolate supremacy level existence. The benefits to them were immeasurable. Returning to the cave abode and spending time to refine it, it would not be long before they experienced another breakthrough. It was even possible for them to break through twice consecutively. Such a temptation was too great. Even in this vast and boundless right bank of the Milky Way, with the void gigantic tortoise's tyrannical power enveloping it, there were still those who could not suppress their greed and took the risk. Furthermore, there were 3 of them at once. Of course, they were clearly prepared. Previously, they had concealed their auras to the extreme, mixing with the remnant experts in space ferocious beasts that blotted out the sky. It was impossible to sense them. Now, it was only because he had suddenly attacked and released a trace of his aura that Yi Xian had instantly locked onto him. Moreover, even if these 3 fellows took the risk to attack, they still hadn't revealed their true appearances. Their figures were only around 30 kilometers tall, and they were even slightly small and inconspicuous when compared to the ferocious beasts in the surrounding space. Even his entire body was shrouded in different colored balls of light. Once his attack failed, he would probably immediately retreat to avoid attracting unnecessary attention. He would go for wool and come home shorn. Yi Xian originally did not plan on taking action now, as the void giant turtle had yet to appear. However, with the situation in front of him, in order to wait for the old bastard that might not appear, it would not be worth it if the 3 desolate supremacy blood essences that were about to be obtained slipped through his fingers. Thinking of this, Yi Xian sighed faintly and rolled his eyes unwillingly. With a flash of his figure, he immediately rushed out of the dormant star core of the abandoned star. At this moment, he had instantly displayed the 9th transformation of the 9 transformations of the demonic ape bloodline. Originally, his cultivation level was only at the 2nd stage of the desolate supremacy realm, but in an instant it had skyrocketed to the 2nd stage of the heavenly path realm, which was extremely terrifying. However, Yi Xian's figure was still maintained as a starry sky berserk ape that was around 3 meters tall. He held a large black rod in his hand. This kind of form, this kind of weapon, was already a famous symbol on the right bank of the Milky Way. Anyone who saw it could tell that it was that ferocious and outstanding violent ape that had arrived. However, although he had already displayed the 9th transformation of the 9 transformations of the demonic ape bloodline, instantly possessing the terrifying cultivation level of the 2nd stage of the heavenly path realm. But at this moment, Yi Xian still maintained the perfect spiritual power mystic technique, trying to hide his figure and aura as much as possible. This was also to avoid being detected by the primeval heaven's eye. When the primeval heaven's eye arrived in anger, he was afraid that it would ruin things. In addition, once the void giant tortoise sensed this aura, even if it came, it would most likely turn around halfway. That was definitely not what Yi Xian wanted to see. Whoosh! At this moment, as his figure rushed out of the abandoned star where he had previously been hiding, a faint sound of something breaking through the air flashed. Yi Xian's figure appeared behind a desolate supremacy beast in the blink of an eye. It was unknown what form and bloodline this old fellow had, but there was no doubt that it was a ferocious star beast. At this moment, he was rushing towards the purple lightning sea that enveloped the old pig spirit when he suddenly felt an obscure aura behind him, faintly making him feel a sense of crisis that made his soul tremble. In shock, his figure instantly stopped in the void, and subconsciously he was about to turn around. Rumble! Bang! A cold light flashed in Yi Xian's eyes, but his figure did not appear. He was still hidden, and even his aura was the same. However, the big-headed black cudgel, which was an offensive weapon, directly appeared from the void and smashed down with a shocking sound of thunder. In less than a tenth of a breath, it fell on the head of this desolate supremacy beast. There was no suspense at all. With a huge explosion, the entire body of the desolate sovereign ferocious beast turned into a rapidly spreading bloody mist in the blink of an eye. Whoosh! As the target's body exploded and turned into a blood mist, Yi Xian immediately waved his hand, and a majestic invisible strength rolled out from his body, covering a radius of 10,000 miles. The majestic blood mist that had just spread out was swept up by him and absorbed into his body. After the battle, he would send it to the bottom of the central region volcano in the space inside the cauldron. Then, he would start the blood essence condensation. All of this took a long time to describe, but in fact it happened in a matter of seconds. From the moment the big-headed black cudgel suddenly appeared from the void and smashed the desolate supremacy beast into a blood mist, to the moment when Yi Xian waved his hand and the big-headed black cudgel disappeared again, the blood mist was also quickly taken away by him. It did not even take a breath. In such a short time, such a shocking change happened, and no one could react. Roar! Kachacha! Again, this old pig is itching for a beating. Awoo. At this moment, the first wave of thunder tribulation dissipated, and the old pig's figure was revealed. Although he was a little embarrassed, he was unscathed. As he raised his head and roared, another earth-shattering explosion came from the sky. After a cracking sound, the second and more powerful tribulation lightning struck down. In the blink of an eye, it enveloped the old pig's spirit's body, and a vast sea of lightning raged. At this time, the two desolate supremacy old monsters that were rushing towards the old pig from the other two directions had already arrived at the edge of the Sea of Thunder, less than 10 billion miles away. However, they clearly sensed the change that had happened here. At the same time, their bodies came to an abrupt stop, and they also turned their heads in surprise. At this moment, Yixian had also made a move. He had concealed his figure and restrained his aura. In less than a tenth of a breath, he had already crossed more than 20 billion miles of space and appeared beside the second desolate supremacy old monster. Chapter 49:16. Rumble. Bam! As Yixian silently crept over, his figure did not appear, and was still hidden. Even his aura was the same, but the big-headed black stick, which was used as an offensive weapon, directly emerged from the void. In the next moment, an earth-shattering rumble of thunder rang out, and the big-headed black stick smashed down from the sky. In the blink of an eye, it had already landed on the head of the desolate sovereign beast. Still, there was no suspense at all. With a huge explosion, the entire body of the desolate sovereign beast turned into a rapidly spreading scarlet mist of blood in the blink of an eye. Whoosh! This was already the second target. As its body exploded and turned into a bloody mist, Yixian immediately waved his hand, and an incomparably majestic and invisible force swept out from his body. In the blink of an eye, it enveloped a radius of 10,000 miles, sweeping up all the blood mist that had just spread out and absorbing it into his body. After the war, he would send it to the bottom of the volcano in the central region of the space within the cauldron. All of this went too smoothly. In just 2 breaths of time, the two desolate sovereigns had been killed. Their bodies and souls were destroyed, and the bloody mist that exploded from their bodies was instantly collected. Not a single strand of hair was left behind. This was definitely an instant kill, and it was an instant kill twice in a row at that. As these thoughts flashed through his mind, the last desolate sovereign was so scared that his body trembled violently. He sucked in a breath of cold air and no longer paid attention to the old pig spirit, who was still roaring in the sea of lightning formed by the second wave of lightning tribulation. With a wave of his hand, he tore open a crack in the void in front of him. He took a step forward and was about to step into it and escape. Unfortunately, it was too late. Boom! Bang! Almost at the same time, in the space to the right of the desolate sovereign, a big-headed black stick suddenly stretched out without any warning. With a fierce smash, accompanied by a rumbling sound in the air, the desolate sovereign's body, which had just taken a step forward, was smashed into a cloud of blood mist in an instant. When the last target fell, Yixian immediately waved his hand. An incomparably majestic and invisible force swept out from his body, enveloping a radius of 10,000 miles. The boundless blood mist that had just spread out was swept up by him and absorbed into his body. After the battle, he would send it to the bottom of the central region volcano in the cauldron space and condense it into desolate supremacy's blood essence. At this point, the 3 desolate supreme-ranked ferocious beasts that had taken the bait had been completely annihilated. Moreover, in the short span of 3 breaths, their bodies had exploded, and even the bloody mist had been taken away. Their bodies and souls had been destroyed, and not a single strand of hair was left behind. In fact, even Yixian himself felt like he was in a dream, let alone the countless survivors and ferocious beast experts who were watching from afar. Although the 3 old fellows were desolate supremacies at the early stages of the second and third stage, a desolate supremacy was still a desolate supremacy. It was very difficult to truly kill them. For Yixian to kill them 3 times in a row, it was even more shocking. If it was in the past, even if it was in the dark like this, Yixian wouldn't have been able to sneak an attack with the big-headed black rod when caught off guard. Not to mention instant killing, it was impossible for him to even successfully kill him. At most, he would be heavily injured, but now he was a terrifying existence at the second stage of the heavenly Tao realm. His combat strength was far from what he could compare to when he was in the primordial world fragment. Furthermore, with the terrifying power of the big-headed black stick, his sudden sneak attack had resulted in such an outcome. Roar! Ka-cha-cha! The last one? Come on. Awoo! It was not until then that the third wave of thunder trial finally dissipated, and Old Pig's figure was revealed. He looked more pathetic than before, but he was still unscathed. He raised his head and roared again, and there was another shocking explosion in the sky. After a cracking sound, the third and more powerful thunder trial struck down. In the blink of an eye, it enveloped Old Pig's body and turned into a vast thunder sea, raging endlessly in the void. All this happened within a few breaths of time. It could be said that in a flash, the three desolate supremacies who had suddenly attacked had been annihilated one after another and turned into ashes. The countless survivors and ferocious beast experts who had gathered 20 to 30 billion miles away in the surrounding void trembled violently as they vaguely realized something. Those existences with weaker cultivation levels could only guess in their hearts. With their cultivation levels, even Universe Knights or Universe Masters could not figure out the specific details. Everything happened too quickly. However, among the countless survivors and ferocious beasts who had gathered to watch, there were obviously some Universe Supreme Beings and even great beings from the primordial era who had been hiding in the crowd. Their cultivation levels were higher, their divine senses were sharper, and their perception was stronger. Although they did not see through everything, they had basically grasped most of the facts. It would have been fine if they did not know, but those Universe Supreme Beings and great beings from the primordial era who knew the truth were even more shocked. Their bodies trembled violently, and their expressions changed drastically. They all gasped in horror, and suddenly there was a tide of horrified exclamations. Desolate supremacies. The three beings who suddenly appeared just now were definitely desolate supremacies. It's too terrifying. Three powerful primordial supremacies were killed by the same person in less than 3 breaths of time. The bloody mist that exploded from their bodies was completely absorbed, and not a single hair was left behind. This technique is so familiar. Could it be that the legendary giant turtle is here again? But it doesn't feel like it, and he doesn't seem to be that strong. That's right. To be able to kill 3 primordial supremacies in an instant, this is definitely not something that desolate supremacies can do. It's impossible for him to do it so easily. The one who did this is probably a great being of the Heavenly Path Realm, or at least the first level of the Heavenly Path Realm. Heavenly Path Realm? How is this possible? 10 years ago, he was only a great being of the primordial era, and he relied on some mysterious and heaven-defying secret technique to have the cultivation level of a primordial supreme. If his combat power has reached the Heavenly Path Realm, does it mean that his real cultivation level has already reached the real desolate supremacies? You guessed it too? What kind of cultivation speed is this? In less than 10 years, he went from the initial level of a great being to the real desolate supremacies. It's clearly an improvement of a whole realm. That's right. It's him. It must be him. That big-headed black stick is so familiar. I can recognize it even if it turns into ashes. I've seen it a few times from afar. This time, the one who did this must be the infamous Violent Star Ape. It's him? Heavens, after being silent for nearly 10 years, has this god of death returned? 10 years ago, he was only hunting great beings, but now he's like that giant turtle. He's also hunting desolate supremacies. Boom! Amidst the exclamations, countless experts in the distant void immediately turned around. Like stray dogs, they scattered and fled for their lives. Yixian didn't pay any attention to all of this. After killing the third desolate venerable beast, the big-headed black rod had once again disappeared into the void. At this moment, he was still using his full strength to activate the perfect mental energy technique. Not only was his figure hidden, even his cultivation level of the second level of the Heavenly Tao realm was hidden as much as possible. Chapter 49:17. Roar! Screech! Screech! Far away in the surrounding void, countless experts from the starfields and forbidden lands on the right bank of the Milky Way were fleeing like stray dogs. They were all frightened out of their wits. The raging star's ape, which had disappeared for more than a decade, had returned. Furthermore, the moment it appeared, it instantly killed 3 powerful primordial supremes in a short span of 3 breaths. This was definitely a sign that its peak combat strength had reached the Heavenly Tao realm. There were naturally Heavenly Tao realm existences in the primordial chaos void, but they were extremely rare. Furthermore, they had never shown themselves. No one knew where they were hiding. Now one had suddenly appeared. Furthermore, it was an infamous raging star's ape that had killed its way to the heavenly Tao realm. It would be strange if they were not afraid. Yixian didn't pay any attention to all of this. At this moment he was still using his full strength to activate the perfect mental energy technique. Not only was his figure hidden, even his cultivation of the second level of the heavenly Tao realm was being concealed as much as possible. If he did not know that he was here and deliberately investigate where he was standing, he would not have sensed any trace of him. The reason why Yixian was doing this was to wait for the appearance of the void giant tortoise. He always believed that the old bastard would not be willing to miss such an opportunity. Yixian was waiting for the appearance of the void giant tortoise. However, even if the old bastard did not appear today, to Yixian, today's plan was considered perfect. It could be said that he had exceeded his original goal. Previously, he had only hoped to obtain 2 Desolate Supremes blood essences today, but now he had killed 3 powerful Desolate Supremes. He already had 3 Desolate Sovereign blood essences in his hands. Now, with the addition of 3 more, the number of Desolate Sovereign blood essences in Yixian's hands had already reached 6. However, this was still not enough. It was far from enough. Furthermore, the perfect pill formula for the level 30 Heavenly Tao treasure pill still required a special material. Therefore, although the minimum requirement of 5 Desolate Supremes blood essences had been gathered, Yixian would not immediately refine the level 30 Heavenly Tao treasure pill. There was no way to refine it. He had to continue gathering the materials. Roar! Kachacha! Awoo! At this time, the third wave of thunder tribulation finally dissipated, and the figure of the old pig spirit was revealed. This time it was obviously more embarrassing. It seemed that he had been slightly injured, but it was not serious. At least, it did not affect his combat strength. At this moment, as the endless sea of lightning dissipated from the third wave of tribulation lightning, the endless tribulation clouds that originally shrouded the sky above also disappeared completely in an instant. After successfully passing through the desolate supremacy lightning tribulation, the old pig spirit was now a true desolate supremacy. The desolate supremacy aura that emanated from his body was extremely dense. Awoo! From this moment on, I, old pig, am also old monster Huang Zun. Awoo! In its excitement, the old pig spirit raised its head and roared. It let out 2 earth-shattering howls. Previously, it was said that this fellow would forget himself once he was proud, and this problem seemed to be getting more and more serious. At this moment, as he successfully passed the desolate venerable tribulation and stepped into the true desolate venerable realm, the old pig spirit raised his head and roared. The aura in his body instantly spread to the extreme, as if he was showing off. Even in the void hundreds of billions of miles away, one could probably sense it a little boom. Selah! At this moment, in the sky above the old pig spirit's head, there was suddenly an earth-shattering explosion. Without any warning, a black crack was torn open in the void. It was hundreds of millions of miles wide. It was extremely terrifying, like a ferocious giant mouth. From the black crack that was like a ferocious giant mouth, a greenish-gray claw stretched out. It was like a giant pillar that held up the sky. With a terrifying aura that could destroy the world, it slashed towards the old pig spirit who was roaring at the sky. At the same time, there was an extremely powerful suppressive aura that extended out from the huge black crack. It was like a raging river. In just an instant, it completely enveloped and locked onto the old pig spirit's huge body. This aura was not to be underestimated. Although it was not a true heavenly Tao realm, it was stronger than any peak desolate supremacy at the 9th step. It was infinitely close to the true heavenly Tao realm. It was only a thin line away. It was definitely the strongest existence under the heavenly Tao realm. It was unrivaled. Furthermore, the aura was ancient and dignified. It exuded an inexplicable suppressive aura. The old pig spirit's body stiffened. He was stunned on the spot. Although he was already a desolate supremacy, he had just experienced the desolate supremacy lightning tribulation. Not only had he just entered this realm, his cultivation had not even stabilized. Now, although he was in the same realm as the owner of the greenish-gray claw, the two of them walked on opposite ends of the spectrum. The old pig spirit could be said to be the weakest existence in the desolate supremacy realm, while the owner of the greenish-gray claw was definitely the strongest existence in the desolate supremacy realm. As such, the huge difference in strength between the two was obvious. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was like the difference between heaven and earth. At this moment, with such a terrifying suppressive aura enveloping him, the old pig spirit's body trembled violently. He stood there in a daze. His face was filled with shock and horror. He did not have the time to dodge or turn around to escape. The giant claw that suddenly stretched out from the void was extremely fast. It was faster than lightning. Although it was far away with such a terrifying speed, it would probably kill the old pig spirit in less than 2 breaths. If this scene really happened, the final result would be obvious. With such a huge difference in strength between the two of them, the old pig spirit, who had just passed the desolate supremacy lightning tribulation, would instantly explode and die. At the same time, when his body and soul were destroyed, the majestic blood fog formed by the explosion of his body would be instantly collected by the other party. Then the other party would immediately escape, because the owner of the greenish-gray claw was the void giant tortoise. Yixian was waiting for this moment. In fact, when the black crack appeared in the void on the right side of the old pig spirit, Yixian's heart was in his throat. And now, as the greenish-gray claw appeared from the crack in the void and attacked the old pig spirit, Yixian, who had been hiding in the dark, had a cold flash in his eyes. He immediately took action. Boom! At this moment, as Yixian waved his hand, the crack in the void instantly exploded. It was originally only a few 100 million miles wide, but now, under the terrifying power of Yixian's second stage heavenly Tao realm strength, it was instantly torn to tens of billions of miles wide. Half of the void giant tortoise's body was revealed. Furthermore, there was an invisible and terrifying force that wrapped around his right forelimb and forcefully pulled his entire body outwards. The void giant tortoise was caught off guard. Its body slammed into the crack, and the crack instantly widened. Seeing this, Yixian's expression instantly turned ferocious. As he roared, he exerted his strength again. Old bastard. Let's see where you can run to this time. Chapter 49:18. Boom. With a loud boom, Yixian's terrifying strength at the second stage of the heavenly Tao realm was instantly torn tens of billions of kilometers away. Half of the void tortoise's body was revealed. A formless and terrifying force wrapped around his right forelimb and pulled his entire body outwards. Caught off guard, the void tortoise slammed into the rift, instantly widening the rift. Old bastard, let's see where you can run off to this time. At that moment, Yixian's expression was ferocious. As he roared, he exerted his strength once again. Gotcha! Boom! The void split into 2. The rift was extremely terrifying, but it was still unable to accommodate the void tortoise's massive body. Yet, this force was irresistible. Helpless, he could only rapidly shrink his body. As such, amidst the heaven-shaking rumbling sounds, the void tortoise was finally forcefully dragged out by Yixian. Although its body had shrunk as much as possible, it was still like a star domain that suddenly fell out. It was unknown how many abandoned stars it crushed and exploded into dust. Phew! Yixian immediately waved his hand and stored the dumbfounded pig spirit into the farmer god treasure cauldron. If not, the fellow might have been heavily injured by the void tortoise's crushing. At that moment, as the old tortoise's body was forcefully pulled out by Yixian, the terrifying rift in the void rapidly began to mend. In a blink of an eye, it was restored to its original state. This was the primordial chaos void. The nomological powers here were just too powerful. Even if a heavenly Tao realm expert tore open a void rift, the rift would quickly mend after the energy was retracted. Darn kid, this was a trap you set? At that moment, it would be strange if the void tortoise still could not tell the problem. That black-skinned pig is actually your partner? Humph, I won't lower myself to your level. As for that black-skinned pig, I'll remember him. The next time I see him, I'll definitely eat him alive. A dignified half-step heavenly Tao, an ancient existence that had lived from the beginning of the prehistoric era to the present, had fallen into Yixian's trap today. The void tortoise was clearly incomparably gloomy. After a cold snort, it took advantage of the moment when Yixian's figure shot away and the force that had been wrapping its right forelimb loosened slightly to dash forward with a whoosh. This was clearly a sign of a guilty conscience, and he wanted to take the opportunity to escape. Originally, he could have just ripped open the void and left, but that would have caused some delay, and he would definitely be locked onto by Yixian again. Even if half of his body entered the void, he would still be dragged out by Yixian like before. Therefore, the void tortoise had no intention of escaping by ripping open the void. Instead, it turned around and ran. At the very least, it wanted to escape a certain distance before ripping open the void again. However, he had clearly forgotten one point. The present Yixian already possessed a terrifying cultivation level of the second stage of the heavenly Tao realm in his devil ape 9th transformation state. As for the void tortoise, it could only be said to be infinitely close to the heavenly Tao realm. Compared to Yixian, it was actually weaker. Since its cultivation level was inferior, its speed was naturally inferior as well. Just as it moved hundreds of billions of kilometers away, its vision blurred. Yixian, who was in his ape form, appeared in front of it and blocked its path. "Darn kid, what are you trying to do? Could it be that your wings have hardened and you want to fight this old tortoise? If I wasn't worried about attracting the favor of the heavenly Tao, this old tortoise would definitely teach you a good lesson today." The void tortoise was extremely depressed. It glared fiercely at Yixian, and as it spoke, it turned around and shot off in another direction. Phew! A weak sonic boom sounded as its vision blurred again. The ape was like a maggot attached to a bone as it followed it and continued blocking its path. This was clearly a rhythm of not giving up until it achieved its goal. "You know what I want to ask. This time I won't give up until I get an answer." Yixian didn't pay attention to him at all. His figure flashed and blocked the path of the void tortoise. He just stood in the air with his arms crossed. He didn't attack the void tortoise, but it was clear that he wouldn't let you go today. "Darn kid. You really are a piece of dogskin plaster. Why can't I shake you off?" The void tortoise was extremely depressed as it grunted in anger. It turned around and fled in another direction. "Now isn't the time to let you know. It's useless to continue pestering me. This old tortoise won't say a word. It's best you leave first, lest you attract the favor of the heavenly Tao. Don't chase after me, or else this old tortoise won't be polite. In your current state, this old tortoise can't beat you, but if you really provoke me, don't think that this old tortoise won't be able to severely injure you. Besides, it's not like this old tortoise doesn't have any helpers. You stinking brat, you definitely don't want to see him." Swish! As soon as he finished speaking, Yixian's figure flashed, and in the blink of an eye, he was once again blocking the void tortoise's path. He still did not make a move and only stood there with his arms crossed, as if he would never compromise. From the looks of it, even if the primeval heavens I was attracted, he would not stop so easily this time. He vowed to get to the bottom of this. Roar! "You stubborn fool, this old tortoise is angry." After being blocked by Yixian several times in a row, it was impossible for the void tortoise to not be annoyed. At this moment, seeing Yixian's figure appear in front of it again, it raised its head and roared. "Old friend, this stinking brat is stubborn. This old tortoise has no other choice, I'll leave it to you. If it really doesn't work, give him a blow and he'll be honest next time." Hiss! Wong! Almost in the next moment, to the right of Yixian's figure, an incomparably clear sound of tearing cloth suddenly rang out, followed by a low buzzing sound. At this moment, Yixian's heart was alarmed. An inexplicable sense of danger suddenly enveloped his entire body, as if he had suddenly been targeted by a venomous snake at close range. His expression changed slightly, and he subconsciously turned his head to look. The scene that entered his eyes immediately caused his eyes to narrow, and he sucked in a breath of cold air. 10 billion miles to the right of his line of sight, there was indeed a crack in the void. It was only about 10,000 feet wide, and in this crack in the void was a figure standing there. Who else could it be other than the desolate ancient Yaksha? Although Yixian had never seen the primeval Yaksha before, he had seen its inheritance phantom in the inheritance image of the heaven-fallen Bao. It was exactly the same as the one in front of him, even the aura was the same. And the cultivation aura that emanated from the primeval Yaksha was clearly the same as that of the void tortoise. It was also at the peak of the 9th stage of the primeval supremacy, which was half a step into the heavenly Tao, and infinitely close to it. What shocked Yixian even more was that at this moment, the primeval Yaksha stood there silently, but its right arm was raised high, and a giant energy bow appeared. Even its right hand was on the bowstring, and an energy arrow appeared. It was the heaven-fallen Bao. Chapter 49:19. Hiss. Hum. The clear sound of ripping cloth suddenly rang out, followed by a low buzzing sound. Yixian was alarmed. He subconsciously turned his head to look and immediately gasped. 10 billion miles to the right there was indeed a crack in the void. The primordial yaksha stood there silently, but his right arm was raised high, and a giant energy bow appeared. Even his right hand was on the bowstring, and an energy arrow appeared. It was the heaven-falling bow. At this moment, the desolate ancient yaksha's eyes were fixed on Yixian. They were cold and emotionless, without the slightest emotion. The energy arrow on the bowstring of the heavenly fallen bow in his hand was locked onto Yixian. Yixian knew his cold personality. If there was a need, the primordial yaksha would definitely not hesitate and attack at the first moment. And now the reason why the primordial yaksha only had the arrow on the bowstring and did not shoot was obviously to deter him. Hiss. All right, brat, you didn't work in vain today. At least you forced the primordial yaksha to show himself. This matter will be settled later. Don't provoke him. Even the old tortoise gives him some leeway. This guy doesn't care about feelings. Just as Yixian was stunned, an incomparably clear sound of silk tearing came from the void in front of him. The void tortoise muttered as it waved its claws and tore open a spatial rift. In the blink of an eye it disappeared. Hum! Before Yixian could recover from his shock, a buzzing sound came from the crack in the space to the right. The desolate ancient yaksha's figure quickly blurred, and in less than a tenth of a breath, it disappeared as well, not leaving behind the slightest aura. When Yixian came back to his senses, not only were the two gone, even the two cracks in the void had been closed. There was no trace to follow at this time. A corner of the void in the distance suddenly trembled faintly. A familiar aura faintly came. It was clearly the primeval heavens I was coming. Damn it, I was careless for a moment and let him escape. Yixian's face darkened. He scolded softly, but did not continue to stay here. With a flash of thought, his entire body turned into a ray of light, directly activating the interstellar coordinate jump ability attached to the system in his body and disappeared in an instant. Whoosh! A faint sound broke through the air. Yixian's figure appeared in the void in the blink of an eye. His divine sense immediately spread out, instantly covering the surrounding 10 billion miles of the void. After a dozen breaths, he was sure that there was no abnormality. Then he shot out. This time, when he activated the interstellar coordinate jump ability attached to the system in his body, the interstellar coordinate jump point was still the base camp of the source nest planet. So where he appeared at this moment. Bye. The reason why he was so cautious was that, on the one hand, he was afraid of the primeval heaven's eye. On the other hand, it was because the base camp of the source nest planet was not far away in the void. If the primeval heaven's eye really caught up and exposed this location, it would undoubtedly be very troublesome. Although the current base camp of the source nest planet looked like a planet, in fact, under the thousands of miles thick rock layer was the entire Longyi star fortress. It could be moved away at any time like an ordinary star fortress and be stationed in another location. But even so, Yixian did not want to see it happen unless it was necessary. After all, the source nest planet had not been exposed before, and no one knew of its existence. Now, even if the location could be changed, at least its existence had been exposed. If the primeval heavens I wanted to track it down, it would take some time and it would be bad if it found it again. Fortunately, the interstellar coordinate jumping ability attached to the system in his body was obviously extremely extraordinary. This time Yixian still left no trace, and the primeval heavens I was unable to chase after him. Furthermore, although the void tortoise had escaped this time, and he could not force any secrets out of it, at least he knew that the primeval yaksha was still alive. Moreover, its cultivation and strength had long been restored. Like the void tortoise, it was already in existence infinitely close to the true heavenly Tao realm. Although the primeval yaksha had used the heaven-falling bow at the last moment, the deterrence from a distance made Yixian feel rather depressed, but he knew that the other party did not really plan to attack. After all, he was now considered an expert on the same side as the headless infant corpse, so he was not too conflicted about it. Thinking about the 3 desolate supremacy blood essences that he had unexpectedly obtained this time, Yixian's mood gradually improved. His expression relaxed, and he immediately dispelled the 9th transformation of the devil ape. However, he still maintained the form of a violent star ape, So the cultivation strength that emanated from his body was at the second stage of the desolate supremacy realm. Whoosh! A faint air-piercing sound was heard. After confirming that there was no abnormality, Yi Xian's figure flashed and directly rushed to the distant source nest star. After his figure landed on the surface of the star, he immediately entered the headquarters that was thousands of miles underground. He was not in a hurry to release the old pig spirit, because if there were no accidents, the fellow was most likely stabilizing his cultivation from the moment he entered the Shenong cauldron. However, although the matter of temporarily returning to the primordial void had been settled, Yi Xian did not immediately leave and return to the void fragment of the primordial void where the rising sun forbidden land was located. This was because before he left he still had something to take care of. All of this had to wait until the old pig spirit stabilized his cultivation and came out of seclusion. 3 days later, Yi Xian waved his hand, and the old pig spirit's figure turned into a ray of light and appeared. After 3 days of recovery and stabilizing his cultivation, he was now refreshed and his aura was extremely condensed. There was a smug look on his face, and anyone who saw him would subconsciously puff out his chest and emit a trace of his aura. It was as if he was afraid that others would not know that he was the old monster Huang Zun. He loved to show off and was so conceited that he did not have the image of a powerful Huang Zun at all. Yi Xian was speechless and rolled his eyes. Okay. Now that you have broken through to the Supreme Master of the remote antiquity and are guarding the base camp of the Source Nest Star, I can be more assured. After the old pig spirit finished showing off, Yi Xian turned his head and looked at him. With a flash of light in his eyes he said, "However, the matter in the void fragment of the primordial void is not over yet. I can't stay here for long, I have to return. However, it won't be long before the end of the primordial void arrives in this world. At that time all the shattered primordial void fragments of the primordial void will be healed, and the primeval heavens I will have a stronger control over the void after it is healed. At that time, all the troops of the magic hall should be able to move here. Who knows how long until that day comes? I don't have the patience to wait forever. This time if you want to leave I will go with you to take a look." Before Yi Xian finished speaking, the old pig spirit rolled his eyes and said, "Didn't you say that you have found that starry sky porcupine? Maybe it is my great-great-grandson. This is a meeting between a grandfather and a grandson, of course we can't delay." Chapter 49:20. Grandfather and grandson meeting? Yi Xian was stunned on the spot when he suddenly heard these words from the old pig spirit. Then, as if it was a conditioned reflex, the image of old pig spirit crying and calling his great-grandson when he saw the primordial porcupine appeared in his mind. The porcupine's face turned green, and he was driven mad on the spot. Needless to say, this scene really piqued Yi Xian's interest. Just thinking about it made him want to laugh. If it really happened and he saw it with his own eyes, it would definitely be more interesting. Just based on this point alone, bringing old pig spirit back to the demon palace was already worth the return ticket. I can take you back, but if your great-grandson can't accept it and throws a tantrum, you have to be responsible for appeasing him. Suppressing his laughter, Yi Xian turned to look at old pig and pretended to be worried. He shook his head and sighed. Speaking of which, I don't know if it's because Porcupine has been lonely since he was young, but his temper is not very good. I'm afraid that he will offend you, his great-grandfather, and make you angry. That's impossible. The old pig spirit raised his front hooves and stood up on his hind legs. He patted his chest loudly and said, "Of course he has a bad temper. That kid definitely takes after me. If that's the case, why would I lower myself to his level? As a great-grandfather, how can I not empathize with my child's suffering? At most I'll just give in to him a little when the time comes. As time goes by, old pig will definitely use kinship to influence him." That's good. The more Yi Xian looked at his smug and insufferably arrogant appearance, the more he wanted to laugh. He was afraid that he would not be able to hold it in and laugh out loud. If that happened, the old pig spirit would see through him. This guy is also very good. Thinking of this, he decided not to dwell on this matter anymore. He changed the topic and brought up the main topic. However, if you leave, we will have to assign another desolate supremacy to guard this place. With just the 7 desolate ancient great beings in the beast army, I am still a little worried. There was no other way before, but it's different now. Furthermore, the primeval heavens I seems to be paying close attention to this primordial chaos void. Once there's any movement, it will immediately descend. This has been confirmed twice in a row. Even the desolate ancient Yaksha has appeared here. It's obvious that the situation is different from before. If the Source Hive base camp doesn't have a desolate supremacy, it's ultimately a little inappropriate. Old pig spirit he naturally agreed but he looked at Yixian. Although he knew that Yixian had 4 half-step heavenly Dao realm electronic avatars, he did not to say bring them to the point of he. This included the 7 gorgeous cultivators who had already entered the desolate supremacy realm. They were still in the demon palace in the forbidden land of Rising Sunday. Therefore, he was a little confused when Yixian suddenly said that he wanted a desolate supremacy to guard this place. This was because in the Source Hive base camp, there were 7 great beings of the primordial era. However, apart from Yixian and himself, there was no one else who was a supreme being of the primordial era. There's no rush. Call Guihai Dao and the others over first. We'll talk about it later. Seeing old pig spirit's confusion, Yixian did not say anything else. With a thought, he extended his divine sense and called for his trusted subordinates, who had yet to enter seclusion, to gather at the command cabin on the top floor of the Wild Dragon battleship. Not long after the order was issued, figures shot out from the entrance of the command cabin. They were all Yixian's trusted subordinates. They had followed him for a long time and belonged to the earliest batch. Among them one could clearly see Guihai Dao, Song Qingyu, Nabashan, Bachai Li, Mosquitos, Wafengtai, and other demon experts. The 8 great guardian deities, Flying Centipede, and Old Monster Inji were also there. In addition, the 7 great beings of the primordial era and other higher-ups of the beast army had also arrived. Although there were not many of them, only a little over 100, which was much less than the number of higher-ups under the command of the Magic Hall, they were all Yixian's most trusted subordinates. After everyone arrived, they did not say much. Their gazes were focused on Yixian, and their faces were rather gloomy. Obviously, they had already guessed the reason why Yixian had suddenly summoned them this time. Whoosh! Whoosh whoosh whoosh! As he nodded slightly, Yixian waved his hand and shot out rays of light toward his trusted subordinates. These rays of light were all storage Dharma treasures. They contained purple gold elixirs, 9 colored elixirs, and a portion of chaos elixirs. Of course, there were also precious pills of various levels that could be used to break through the bottleneck of a large realm. With the previous example of the old pig spirit wasting 3 years of time, this time, Yixian left behind 100 or so trusted subordinates of various levels of precious pills, all the way until they reached level 28. Everyone had one of each level. Apart from that, he even left behind 20 level 29 desolate supremacy elixirs for Guihai Dao's safekeeping. Whoever broke through to the primordial era first would be allowed to consume them. However, Yixian also instructed that if they were to break through to the desolate supremacy realm, even if they succeeded, they definitely could not easily leave the space inside the Wild Dragon ship. Otherwise, once they were sensed by the primordial chaos void's nomological force in the outside world, a desolate supremacy lightning tribulation would definitely descend. It was not that he did not have confidence in them, and was worried that they would not be able to withstand the baptism of the desolate supremacy tribulation. It was just that the primordial chaos void was not peaceful. If they were targeted by other desolate supremacies during the tribulation, it would not be good. Therefore, the safest way was to stay in the Wild Dragon ship space after breaking through and wait for Yixian's next return. Once they had a guarantee, they would then go out to undergo the tribulation. Guihai Dao and the others naturally obeyed his instructions. They all nodded with solemn expressions. Whoosh! In the next moment, Yixian waved his hand again. The Rai-D seal that was suspended above his sea of consciousness was taken out by him. It turned into a ray of light and shot out. In the blink of an eye, it disappeared into the depths of a mountain range. Some of them had seen the Rai-D seal before, while some had not. Seeing him suddenly do such a thing, they were all confused. They looked at each other with blank expressions. Clearly, they did not understand the purpose of Yixian's actions. That's the Rai-D seal. The thunder spirit of the Emperor seal inside is now a rank 1 desolate supremacy. Furthermore, as it is a thunder spirit, its true battle strength is astonishing. I'm afraid that even a rank 3 desolate supremacy might not be its match. Seeing his subordinates turn their heads and look at him with confused expressions, Yixian smiled and nodded. When Old Pig and I are not around, it will be guarding the Source Nest base camp. I have already explained it clearly. All of you just need to treat it as if it does not exist. Cultivate when you need to and go into seclusion when you need to. Patrol outside as usual and remain vigilant. If an accident really happens, the Thunder Spirit will take action at the appropriate time. Furthermore, the Emperor's seal is here. Even a rank 4 middle stage Desolate Supremacy would not be able to do anything to it. You can rest assured. Chapter 49-21. After explaining everything clearly, Yixian immediately left the Source Nest Star Base Camp with Old Pig and embarked on the journey back to the Void Fragment of the Chaos World. Old Pig had always been in the Chaos World and had never been there, so he did not know where the spatial passage from the Chaos World to the Void Fragment of the Chaos World was. If it was in the past, Yixian might have been on guard, but there was no need for that now. On one hand, he was not worried about Old Pig. On the other hand, his cultivation had reached a certain level, so there was no need to be too cautious. After the two left the Source Nest Star Base Camp, they hid their figures and restrained their auras. They traveled at full speed, and it only took them 2 days to reach the vicinity of the spatial passage. Xiao! Xiao! A weak sound of breaking through the air rang out. With Yixian in front and the Old Pig spirit behind, the two of them quickly charged into the incomparably secretive spatial tunnel and disappeared from the primordial chaos void. Again, when they appeared again, they were already in the depths of the Rising Sun Forbidden Land, in the secret and remote corner of the star domain. At this time, the two of them were only about 10 feet tall. One was a violent ape, and the other was a black-skinned pig. Currently, Yixian and the Old Pig spirit were at the same cultivation level. They were both at the first level of the primordial sovereign. At this moment, the two of them had activated the bloodline ability in their bodies, so the cultivation they displayed had increased by 1 level. They were at the second level of the Desolate Sovereign. If Old Pig Spirit Gua used his Demonic Pig 9 Transformations bloodline ability to the highest level, which was the 7th transformation, he would instantly have the power of a Desolate Level 9 Peak Stage Desolate Venerable. Yixian's bloodline ability of the 9 transformations of the Demonic Pig had been deduced to the highest level, which was the 9th transformation. In theory, once he entered the 9th transformation of the 9 transformations of the Demonic Pig, his cultivation level would be 2 levels higher than Old Pig's, which was the second order of the Heavenly Tao realm. But unfortunately, that could only be achieved in the primordial chaos void. As for the void fragment of the Great Desolate World, due to the suppression of the Great Desolate Heavenly Will, the peak cultivation that Yixian could reach was only at the peak of the 9th step of the Desolate Realm. Deng, however, even though they were both Desolate Supremes, Yixian was the result of being suppressed under the 9th transformation. Hence, compared to Old Pig Spirit, he was definitely stronger. Moreover, he still had the power of the Bloodsea secret technique. Once he used it, the 3 Bloodsea doppelgangers would come out at the same time, and he would be able to easily torture Zhu. Furthermore, this was without taking into account the 4 heavenly kings. If all of them were included, Pig Spirit would probably tremble in fear. Is this the forbidden land of Rising Sun? Indeed, the atmosphere is extraordinary. But boss, I Old Pig am new here. The key is that I have a great-grandson watching from the side. I don't have a proper status. Think about what position you can arrange for me first. As he spoke, the Old Pig Spirit stopped and turned to look at Yixian. Then he directly performed the 7th transformation of the 9 transformations of the Demonic Pig. In an instant, the cultivation aura that was emitted from his body had reached the 9th stage Desolate Supremes. However, it was still restrained and did not leak out too much. The reason why the Old Pig Spirit was like this was obviously to pretend to be strong. He wanted to pretend to be a big wolf in front of the great-grandson that he had yet to meet. This Yixian was well aware of all this. He found it funny, but he did not expose him. No. Just like what Old Pig Spirit said, his 9th rank Desolate Supremacy cultivation base was enough. However, he needed to prepare for his position. Otherwise, if he did not have a position, he would be an outsider. Thinking about it, he would not feel close enough. There are the 8 great Vajras in the Source Nest Star Base Camp, and there are also the 4 great Heavenly Kings in the Demon Palace here. They are my 4 electronic avatars, and they are all at the 9th stage Desolate Supremacy. How about? After thinking for a while, Yixian continued. How about I announce that the 4 Heavenly Kings will be changed to 5 Heavenly Kings? How about you be one of them? No, no, they are all your doppelgangers. This old pig spirit is not. Hearing this, the old pig spirit shook his head like a rattle drum on the spot. His face was full of unwillingness. Besides, it was originally 4 heavenly kings. If it suddenly changed to 5, it would be as if this pig spirit was forcefully stuffed in. It feels inferior. Moreover, although the position of heavenly king sounds good, there are 4 after all. It doesn't look good enough. Halfway through, he seemed to have thought of something. His eyes lit up. That's right, boss. Didn't you say that you are the master of the magic hall? This old pig spirit is a unique and domineering position that no one can share. Is there anyone else? Domineering? Unique? You really have a lot of requirements. Yi Xian was also speechless. He rolled his eyes and muttered, "Why don't I just call you the Magic Hall Pig Tyrant?" Magic Hall Pig Tyrant? Tyrant of pigs? That's not bad. Yi Xian was just joking. However, when the old pig spirit heard this, his eyes lit up. He immediately wagged his tail. Not bad, not bad. Boss is indeed boss. Just randomly giving me a position and I'm already so domineering. In the future I will be the Magic Hall's Lord Pig Tyrant. That works too? Yi Xian was also speechless. He shook his head and sighed. However, he did not reject. This matter was settled just like that. However, to be honest, he really did not feel that the words tyrant of the Magic Hall were domineering at all. No matter how domineering the title was, the word pig would definitely ruin it. After settling this matter, Yi Xian also used the bloodline ability of the 9 transformations of the demonic ape to the 9th transformation. He no longer suppressed the cultivation in his body. In an instant, the aura of a 9th stage desolate supremacy spread out. The entire vast and boundless forbidden land of rising sun could sense it. Whoosh! Whoosh! A weak sound of something breaking through the air rang out. Yi Xian and the old pig spirit shot out one after another, quickly arriving near his cave star. Looking around, he saw a large number of figures shooting over from all directions. It was obvious that there were 6 blood dragons: Zhao Dong, Qian Nan, Sun Shi, Li Bei, Elder Sangji and the other survivors, Green Cow and Yu Linglong, Dragon Centipede, Gong Jun, Howling Moon Mastiff, 3-clawed Flood Dragon, Long Shantang, Blood Dragon Ancestor, Green Rock Ancestor, as well as the emperors from the 3 races. Coincidentally, almost all of the higher-ups of the 6 armies in the Magic Hall had just finished a round of seclusion, so they all came over when they sensed Yi Xian's aura. For example, the surviving members of the Sangji tribe in the remnant army, the 20 over immortal emperors in the forbidden land of rising sun, and the 3-clawed flood dragon Long Shantang, and the other members of the parliament who were captured by the nomadic army. And finally, there were over 200 emperors in the captive army formed by the Blood Dragon, Green Rock, and Battle Lion race captives, including the 9 ancient great beings from the 3 races, the 3 great beings from the original Survivor Alliance, and the black-robed desolate sovereign. Dang! Then the primordial porcupine, the primordial hairy tortoise, and the higher-ups of the 10,000 evil army were all gathered here. There was also the commander of the Heavenly River Army, Old Devil Mosquito Butcher, Naples, Devil King Mo Tian, Demon Uncle, Dark Tortoise Tribe Leader Mingjiao, Mad Mosquito Emperor, Old Man Xinyuan, Old Man Duanmu, Abyss Bodhi, and many other higher-ups of small sects and clans. Oceania, total of over 1,000 silhouettes gathered from all directions. Please remember the domain name of the book. Mobile version of the website. Chapter 4922. Whoosh! 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 Yi Xian and Pig Demon shot over at extreme speeds and soon arrived outside the cave abode star. However, they did not enter and instead stopped outside the cave abode star's atmosphere. Looking around, all the upper echelons of the Magic Hall had gathered. This Yi Xian did not spend too much time in the primordial chaos void, so everyone did not feel strongly about it. It was as though they had just casually made a trip out and returned quickly. However, what surprised them was that not only did Yi Xian return alone, he even brought back a black-skinned pig. Furthermore, its cultivation level was so terrifying. It was the same as Yi Xian and his 4 electronic avatars, the 4 heavenly kings. It had also reached the perfected desolate supremacy level 9, which was equivalent to the half-step heavenly Tao realm. This at that moment, as everyone gathered, All the upper echelons of the magic hall focused their gazes on Pig Demon. This old fellow's problem of getting carried away was getting worse. Now that he was in the limelight, he felt like he was floating. At that moment, he stood up with his hind legs in the void while his front legs were placed on his waist. He puffed out his chest and raised his head high with his nostrils facing the sky. He was just short of writing the words "I'm an expert" on his face. This everyone present was shrewd, so they naturally saw through his smugness and flaunting. Immediately, their expressions turned odd as they exchanged looks. They were somewhat speechless, but with Pig Demon's cultivation level and strength, no one dared to offend him for a moment. This highness has just returned from the primordial chaos void. Yi Xian forcefully stifled his laughter as he turned to survey the upper echelons of the magic hall before saying, "To be honest, we also have a base in the primordial chaos void. It can even be said to be our true base camp, the forbidden land of the rising sun. It is only a matter of time before we leave. When that time comes, countless subordinates of the 6 legions will gather in that base camp. I've always been in charge of the magic hall in the forbidden land of ascension, and he was in charge of the primordial void's nest." At this point, Yi Xian had a strange expression on his face. He tried his best to hold back his laughter. As he spoke, he pointed at Zhu Ling and said, "This is Pig Tyrant from the magic hall. You can call him Master Pig Tyrant from now on." During this period of time, there are other arrangements at the primordial void source nest's base camp. Pig Tyrant will remain in the rising sun forbidden land. As for the cave dwelling star, it will be located slightly further away from my cave dwelling star. Just pick a suitable place. This was done after careful consideration. Yi Xian had purposely arranged for this guy to be further away from him, so as to avoid being constantly harassed by him. This guy had a restless temperament, and if he got too close to him, he would definitely cause a lot of trouble and annoyance. This Master Pig Tyrant almost shocked everyone. The strange expression on their faces became even more intense, but there was nothing they could do. After looking at each other, everyone continued to call him Master Pig Tyrant, which could be considered as a form of greeting. It's right for them to call him Master Pig Tyrant, but you can't. You have to call him Great Grandpa Pig. All the higher-ups in the magic hall were calling him Master Devil Tyrant, which made Zhu Ling extremely happy. He felt that this was the best time to acknowledge Zhu Ling's grandson as family. Yes. Therefore, after proudly nodding slightly as a response to everyone, he turned to look at the primordial porcupine in front of him on the right side of the void. He pointed at him with his right hoof and said, "How is it? Are you very happy? Are you very surprised? That's right, I'm your great-grandpa. Hurry up and kowtow to my great-grandson. Aya, what's going on? Why are you wearing a green hat on your head? Where's my great-granddaughter-in-law? She's too rude. I can't indulge an old sow who doesn't abide by the feminine virtues. Call her out, I'll help you scold her." As soon as he said this, everyone was shocked. Even Yi Xian was dumbfounded. After being stunned for 2 seconds, he subconsciously turned to look at the primordial porcupine. This guy had black skin, but didn't he have a tuft of green hair on his head? With his current height, this tuft of green hair was just right on top of his head. It really did look like a small green hat. There was no need to say much about who this green hat was. Other than the primordial tortoise who wore pants with the primordial porcupine, who else could it be? This. Although the two of them were not as strong as the primordial porcupine, they were still powerful people from the primordial era. Among the higher-ups of the magic hall, their cultivation was ranked second. Other than Yi Xian, the 4 heavenly kings, and the black-robed desolate sovereign of the Survivors' Alliance, they were the strongest. When they first arrived, they were only first-stage powerful people. Now they were already 4th-stage powerful people of the primordial era. To be honest, with Yi Xian's 9-colored divine medicine and chaos medicine, it wouldn't take long for them to enter the desolate sovereign realm. Moreover, the two of them had a special relationship with Yi Xian. Therefore, even if the primordial porcupine was a 9th-stage desolate sovereign, the two of them didn't put him in their eyes. If there was no conflict, it would be fine. They would give each other face and call each other Lord Porcupine. It didn't matter who had the upper hand. But this guy came and talked about them like this. It was simply intolerable. These thoughts flashed through their minds. The primordial porcupine and the primordial tortoise were stunned for a few seconds. They instantly became angry and roared at the same time. A woo! Before the roar fell, they had already turned to look at Yi Xian. Their faces were full of anger, and they looked like they could go berserk at any time. Boss, what do you mean by this? Could it be that you think we've been too comfortable recently, so you deliberately got this guy to find excitement for everyone? That's right, that's right. Where did you get this idiot? He actually opened his mouth and took advantage of me. Why don't you look at how ugly he is? Hearing this, it seemed like they were blaming Yi Xian, which made him speechless. The sudden appearance of such a situation was unexpected. For a moment, everyone was stunned. The void was silent, and the atmosphere was even a little dull. Cough cough. Old Porcupine, you can't blame me for this. It's your own family matter. After coughing twice, Yi Xian raised his hand and pointed at the old porcupine beside him. He turned to look at the primordial porcupine, and the expression on his face became strange. Don't you feel it yourself? This is the aura of the bloodline origin. What you inherited in your body is indeed this guy's bloodline. You may have taken advantage of him, but it's also possible that he's a great-grandson. The primordial porcupine was stunned. He really didn't sense it before. This was normal. Who would sense whether the other person was their own ancestor? Here, when he heard Yi Xian's reminder, he immediately activated the bloodline power in his body. After sensing it, his expression suddenly changed. He raised his head and let out an incomparably mournful howl. It's actually true? Oh, my life is too bitter to have such a cheap pig ancestor. No, I won't admit it. I will go against the heavens and change my fate. I will never enter his nest. Please remember the domain name of this book. Mobile version of reading website. Chapter 4923. Magic Hall. In the void outside Yi Xian's abode, O'Neill, the higher-ups of the Magic Hall were gathered, but the atmosphere was extremely strange. To have such a lowly pig ancestor, this old pig's life is too bitter. No, I won't accept it. This old pig wants to go against the heavens and change my fate. I will never enter his nest. A woo. After hearing Yi Xian's reminder, the primordial porcupine immediately activated the bloodline power in its body. After sensing it, its expression immediately changed. It raised its head and let out an incomparably mournful howl. Such an outcome made the eyes of the surrounding Devil Hall's upper echelons almost pop out of their sockets. The primordial porcupine actually met a great-great-great-grandfather of the same bloodline here? This was too dramatic. Originally, this was a good thing. After all, this great-grandfather was in existence at the peak of the 9th step of the Desolate Supremacy. However, looking at his character, as these thoughts flashed through their minds, all the higher-ups of the Magic Hall immediately showed sympathy and pity on their faces. To have such a pig grandpa, it was really bad luck of 8 lifetimes. They were too embarrassed to greet him when they went out. This time, even the primordial porcupine was stunned. Just now, he was also unable to restrain his anger. Now that he heard that the old pig spirit was indeed the primordial porcupine's great-grandfather, and might even be its great-grandfather, he was so scared that he trembled on the spot. After shrinking his turtle head, he rushed to the back of the right side of the void with a whoosh, hiding behind the higher-ups of the Magic Hall, immediately drawing a clear line with the primordial porcupine. This was how it should be. All along, he and the primordial porcupine had been wearing the same pants. Wherever they went, the two of them were like brothers. Now that the primordial porcupine suddenly had such a great-grandfather that made people speechless, that was a true bloodline ancestor. He couldn't get rid of it even if he wanted to. The so-called going against the heavens and changing one's fate was just an unwilling roar in his heart. But the primeval porcupine had no choice but to accept its fate. But he was different. At this moment his position was very important, and he had to maintain a distance from Chan Shi. Otherwise, if he were to suddenly become Chan Shi's great-great-grandson, then it wouldn't be worth it. When the primordial porcupine saw this, he was even more heartbroken. He turned to look at the primordial hairy tortoise who was hiding behind the crowd. His face was filled with grief and indignation. Old tortoise, you're such a disloyal bastard at this critical moment. No. This is your family matter. I, old tortoise, will not interfere. When he finished speaking, the archaic turtle shook his head vigorously, as if he was not going to follow the code of brotherhood even if he was beaten to death. Besides, your great-grandpa pig doesn't seem to like green, so I won't stick to you anymore. It's not good to affect your relationship with your grandpa. PFFF. The primordial porcupine was so angry that it wanted to vomit blood, but there was nothing it could do. It looked pitifully at Yi Xian, but the latter calmly turned to look into the distance, as if he was admiring the scenery. His temper is really bad. This is like me. It was unknown if it was because Yi Xian had already taken precautions before this, but at this moment the primordial porcupine's reaction, including his clamoring to go against the heavens and change his fate, and never acknowledge his ancestors, Old Tortoise did not care at all. Instead, he nodded and smiled with appreciation. Not bad, not bad. You have quite the demeanor of Old Tortoise. Your demeanor back then was just like this. Bullsh *T. Old Tortoise is not like you. Old Tortoise, The primordial porcupine was even angrier, but he stopped abruptly halfway through his words. Fang Zhangji called himself Old Tortoise, and he also called himself Old Tortoise. Wasn't this very similar? Not only was it similar, it was simply too similar to be more similar. Anger at this point, he even wanted to change the way he addressed himself as Old Tortoise, but after all, he was used to calling himself Old Tortoise. He did not know how to change it for a moment. In his anxiety, he could not even continue speaking. His face and neck were red, and it was really unbearable to look at. After all, you have been wandering outside for so many years and I don't know when it happened. You have some resentment, Old Tortoise, I can understand. Seeing that the primordial porcupine was no longer speaking, and was staring at him with a pair of pig eyes, as if he was still resentful, Old Tortoise shook his head and sighed. Then he said, "However, you are Old Tortoise's great-great-grandson after all. As your great-grandfather, Old Tortoise will naturally not bicker with you. Not only will I not bicker with you, but I will also pass on the strongest bloodline ability of our porcupine lineage, the demonic pig 9 transformations, to you." At this point the old pig spirit's chest puffed up again, and his pair of front hooves habitually reached his non-existent waist. He raised his head high and looked like he was going to use his nose to threaten the sky. He said in a long tone, "Speaking of which, the bloodline ability of the 9 transformations of the demonic pig was not passed down to the next generation after your great-grandpa's generation. So you definitely won't. I, Great Tortoise, am sorry for this matter. Otherwise, with your current 4th stage cultivation base, once you use the bloodline ability of the demonic pig 9 transformations, you can instantly increase your battle strength by a large realm. With a shake of your body, you will become a 4th stage desolate venerable. Outside, you will also suffer less humiliation." Hearing this, primordial porcupine was stunned on the spot. It could actually increase one's cultivation base by a large realm? Why did this sound more and more like Boss's demonic pig 9 transformations? Since when did the porcupine lineage have such a heaven-defying bloodline ability? However, although he was puzzled, he was soon relieved. Didn't he say? When it came to his generation, it was no longer passed down. It was only natural that he didn't know about it. Dang. However, these were not important. What was important was that from his tone, it seemed that this demonic pig 9 transformations bloodline ability could be passed down to him. If that was the case, once he learned it, wouldn't he be able to become a 4th stage desolate venerable in an instant? Thinking of this, primordial porcupine was a little moved. If he could learn this heaven-defying bloodline ability, it was fine to acknowledge this pig as his ancestor. However, considering the blood relationship between him and the pig, he reckoned that the pig's character would not be much better. The possibility of this matter being a scam was still very high. Thinking of this, the primordial porcupine immediately turned to look at old pig spirit. It sized him up from head to toe and muttered, "You old thing, don't tell me you're using this method to trick me into calling you Grandpa Pig? Tisk, how could I be such a pig?" Old pig spirit's face was full of disdain. He curled his lips and patted his chest on the spot. "As long as you acknowledge me as your ancestor and call me Grandpa Pig, I will guarantee that you will learn it within 3 days. Otherwise, I will have no problem calling you Grandpa Pig." The dignified Huang Zun old monster said such words in public. There was basically no problem. After confirming this, primordial porcupine's breathing suddenly became rapid. A pair of round pig eyes burst out with green light. He immediately rushed toward old pig spirit. "You can only have demonic pig 9 transformations. Not to mention great-grandpa, even great-grandpa is no problem. From now on, you are old pig spirit's ancestor." With a smile on his face, he tried his best to curry favor. Ancestor Pig Spirit is blessed. Please remember the domain name of this book. Mobile version of reading website. Chapter 49-24. It had to be said that this pair of grandfather and grandson were truly jackals of the same tribe. Previously they seemed to have a grudge against each other, but now in the blink of an eye they were on good terms. After chatting for a short while, they actually started calling each other brothers and old friends. Jian. They were like a pair of good brothers. The surrounding higher-ups of the magic hall were dumbfounded and felt a chill run down their spines in the end. This pair of grandfather and grandson, who were birds of a feather, scurried away with a wretched smile on their faces. As for Yi Xian, after shaking his head and smiling bitterly, he quickly withdrew his thoughts towards the black-robed desolate sovereign of the Survivors' Alliance, asked about the changes in the situation of the Eldritch Wasteland fragment during the time he was away. The black-robed desolate sovereign did not hide anything and immediately reported in full detail. Or perhaps it was because Yi Xian hadn't been gone for a long time, but during this period of time, there weren't any major changes in the void of the great desolate world. The Tianji clan had been extremely quiet. After all, the Tianji beast that D had condensed with the strength of the entire Tianji clan had just successfully entered the true heavenly Dao realm. Now it was most likely still in seclusion, healing some of the injuries left behind by the heavenly Dao lightning tribulation. As for the heavenly Dao alliance, its three major factions, the Human Race Federation, the Star Alliance, and the Myriad Race Alliance, did not have any abnormalities and were extremely quiet during this period of time. However, Yi Xian was well aware that the three major factions that formed the Heavenly Dao Alliance would definitely take action secretly. After all, they also knew that the Tianji beast of the Tianji clan would recover from its injuries in 4 or 5 years at most. When that time came, it would be a Heavenly Dao realm existence in its peak state. With the current strength of the Heavenly Dao Alliance, it was absolutely impossible for them to match up to it. While before this, the Tianji clan had always been at war with the Human Race Federation. Moreover, the Tianji clan's base camp in the Eldritch Wasteland fragment was the closest to the Human Race Federation's location. Once the Tianji beast came out of seclusion, it was very likely that they would be the first to go on a punitive expedition. For this, it was impossible for the Human Race Federation to not be prepared. Furthermore, the Star Alliance and the Myriad Race Alliance had already formed a single entity. Once something happened to the Human Race Federation, they would also be in the same boat. Of course, the Human Race's Alliance. All of this originally had nothing to do with Yi Xian. Although the Heavenly Dao Union had always been at odds with him, a terrifying existence at the Heavenly Dao realm had appeared in the void of the primordial world fragment. Furthermore, it was their old enemy. Under such circumstances, the Heavenly Dao Alliance wouldn't have the time to bother with the Magic Hall or find trouble with Yi Xian, be it in the next few years or after the Heavenly Mystery Beast came out of seclusion. But just because they did not look for trouble with Yi Xian, it did not mean that Yi Xian did not want to look for trouble with them. Even the 8 desolate sovereigns of the Star Alliance and the Alliance of 10,000 races were a great temptation to Yi Xian. Son of that was why Yi Xian said there were 8 of them, because he did not include the blood-devouring war lion at all. The blood-devouring war lion was only an almighty being of the primordial era. Only after activating the 9 Berserk Lion Transformation Bloodline ability could he possess the combat strength of a desolate sovereign. Even if he was killed, he would not be able to refine a desolate sovereign's blood essence. At most, it would be a supreme-grade blood essence. What Yi Xian needed the most now was a desolate sovereign's blood essence. He really did not care about the blood-devouring war lion, however. Although the 8 desolate sovereigns' blood essences were placed in the hands of the Star Alliance and the Alliance of 10,000 races, it was not that easy to obtain them. The Alliance of 10,000 races was now united. It could be said that a single move would affect the entire situation. Even with the Magic Hall's current strength and peak combat strength, they would only be able to obtain half of the 8 desolate sovereigns' blood essences. It was almost impossible to obtain all of them. After all, the 8 desolate sovereigns were separated. There were 4 desolate sovereigns in the Star Alliance and 4 in the Alliance of 10,000 races. Yi Xian only had one chance to launch a sneak attack. No matter which side he launched a sneak attack on, the other side would immediately be alerted. And this sneak attack had to be carried out as soon as possible. As the crisis of the Heaven's Legacy Beast approached, the 3 great alliances would definitely be secretly making preparations. After all, They represented the various races of the three great starry skies planes. Within the three great alliances, there were still stronger existences in hibernation. Even if there were no true heavenly Tao realm existences among them, if a few desolate sovereigns at the peak of 9th stage who were half-step into the heavenly Tao realm were to jump out, Yi Xian's sneak attack would completely fail. And the target he chose to launch a sneak attack on was the alliance of 10,000 races. There was almost no need to choose. After all, although the Star Alliance only had 4 prey, they had 5 desolate sovereign-level combat strength. No matter how one looked at it, the alliance of 10,000 races was more cost-effective. After making the decision, Yi Xian immediately returned to the cave abode star. He extended his divine sense and found that whether it was the 3 girls Purplish Warbler Duanmu Xiaocha Zhao Qianru, or the 7 beautiful cultivators who had recently stepped into the first stage desolate sovereign level, they were all still in seclusion and had yet to come out. Then, seeing his arrival, the 4 heavenly kings immediately rushed out of the magic hall and lined up in front of Yi Xian. They were his 4 electronic avatars and were one with each other. Therefore, there was no need for any verbal communication. They could communicate telepathically with just a thought. He did not immediately come out because Old Pig Spirit still needed 3 days. For example, today he was already a 4th stage mighty figure. After activating the Demon Pig bloodline, he could instantly become a 5th stage mighty figure. Then, he could use the 9 Devil Ape transformation bloodline ability to the 7th transformation. His peak strength would be at the 3rd stage desolate sovereign level, stronger than the Black Robe desolate sovereign of the Survivors Alliance. With this calculation, there were a total of 18 desolate sovereign level combat strengths in the magic hall. The 7 beautiful cultivators, the Emperor's Seal Thunder Spirit, the Black Robe desolate sovereign, Old Pig Spirit, and the Primordial Porcupine in its 7th transformation. In addition, there were Yi Xian's 3 Blood Sea avatars and the 4 heavenly kings. No, yes, the Emperor's Seal Thunder Spirit had been left by Yi Xian in the Hongmeng Void's Origin Nest base camp. Therefore, there were a total of 17 desolate sovereign-level combat strengths in the magic hall. This time Yi Xian did not plan to let the 7 beautiful cultivators, the Black Robe desolate sovereign, and the Primordial Porcupine participate in the sneak attack on the alliance of 10,000 tribes. They would stay in the magic hall. Other than Yi Xian himself, he only planned to bring Old Pig Spirit along for the expedition to the alliance of 10,000 tribes. Look. It seemed that there were only Yi Xian and Old Pig Spirit. The number of people seemed a little small. However, in reality, Yi Xian alone represented the combat strength of the 7 peak desolate sovereigns, the 3 Blood Sea avatars and the 4 heavenly kings. In addition, Old Pig Spirit was also a Baron Master at the peak of the great perfection of rank 9. The 2 of them represented a terrifying combat power. In this untainted land fragment void, perhaps only the Tianji beast that D had fused with the entire Tianji tribe's power could contend against them. Under this situation, as long as everything went smoothly, there was at least an 80% chance of killing the 4 middle stage desolate sovereigns of the alliance of 10,000 tribes. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. In these 3 days, Yi Xian stayed in the cave dwelling star and did not go out. He was waiting for Old Pig Spirit and the Primordial Porcupine. Regarding the sneak attack on the alliance of 10,000 tribes, Yi Xian had already told Old Pig Spirit through voice transmission. Therefore, although this old fellow was not reliable, it would take at most 3 to 4 days to complete everything. Please remember the domain name of this book. Mobile version of reading website. Chapter 4925. 3 days later. In the depths of the rising sun forbidden land where the magic hall was located. The void was originally quiet, but at this moment, an earth-shattering roar suddenly broke the silence. Roar! Demonic Pig 9 transformations. 7th transformation. In the void, the immemorial porcupine roared, and his body immediately expanded. In the blink of an eye, he was as huge as a small star. What was more shocking was the soaring strength in his body. Previously, he was only a 4th level powerful figure, but now he was a 3rd level supreme figure, which was almost a huge leap. It was simply shocking at this result. Old Pig, who was watching from the side with his hooves on his waist, was grinning from ear to ear. He looked like a child who could be taught. Xiao! Xiao xiao xiao! This commotion was too great, and the entire forbidden land of Rising Sun was alarmed. In an instant, faint sounds of breaking through the air could be heard from all directions. Looking around, there were six-headed blood dragon Zhaodong, Qiannan, Sun Shi, Li Bei, Elder Sangji, and other powerful figures of the remnant people: Green Ox, Yu Linglong, Long Ao, Gong Jun, Roaring Moon Mastiff, Three-Clawed Dragon, Long Shantang, Blood Dragon Ancestor, Green Rock Ancestor, and the emperors of the three clans. They were the higher-ups of the 6 armies of the Magic Hall. Of course, this included the immemorial Tortoise, the commander of the Heavenly River Army, the Old Devil Mosquito Butcher, Naples, the Devil King Mo1 Tian, the Imperial Uncle of the Demon Tribe, the Dark Tortoise Tribe leader Mingjiu, the Mad Mosquito Emperor, Old Man Shenyuan, Old Man Duanmu, Abbess Bodhi, and many others. They had just witnessed the process of Old Pig and Immemorial Porcupine recognizing each other 3 days ago. The reason why they were not in seclusion these 3 days was to see if Old Pig was reliable. At this moment, as the crowd swarmed over, they could feel the rank 3 desolate venerable aura emitted from the primordial porcupine's body from far away in the void. Immediately, all of their expressions changed greatly. All of them gasped and cried out in shock. "Master Pig, I'm your grandson's sworn brother." In particular, the primordial turtle was the most excited. It let out a long roar and turned into a green light, shooting toward the pig. In the blink of an eye, he was right in front of them. He asked, "Grandpa Pig, do you know anything about the demonic turtle 9 transformations? Or perhaps you know 1 or 2 old bastards with green fur in the primordial void. They might be the old turtle's old turtle ancestor." As he spoke, the higher-ups of the Magic Hall who were rushing over from afar were almost knocked over by the lightning and fell into the void. "All right, disperse. Be more vigilant during this period of time. Black Robe, Old Pig, the 2 of you don't go into seclusion for now. Wait for me and Pig Tyrant to come back first." At this moment, a figure floated out of the atmosphere of Yi Xian's abode. It was Yi Xian. Here at that time he was still in the form of the devil ape. The 4 heavenly kings had already absorbed him into their bodies, leaving only the old pig spirit. Yes, he had already informed the old pig spirit about this. The latter understood and looked at the primordial porcupine. He raised his hoof and patted his chest, saying, "Great-grandson, comprehend it well. Great-grandpa will teach you the last 2 transformations later. Once you use them, you will be a late-stage 5th-stage desolate master." These words sounded as if he had already comprehended the 8th and 9th transformations of the devil pig. Hearing this, Yi Xian was also drunk. He rolled his eyes and thought to himself that these 2 fellows were indeed worthy of being grandfather and grandson. They were both of the same character. The crowd dispersed quickly. The old pig spirit followed Yi Xian and rushed out of the forbidden land of Rising Sunday. The 2 of them hid their figures and concealed their auras. Then they moved quietly in the direction of the star area where the Alliance of 10,000 Races was located. Last time, the space rats, the hell ants, the giant ferocious, and the evil slimes of the Alliance of 10,000 Races had also migrated to this place, which increased the Alliance's military strength by 40 billion battleships, 24 late-stage grand cultivators, and 4 mid-stage supreme masters of the ancients. Of course, those 24 powerful figures of the ancients had all been killed by Yi Xian. No, during this period of time, among the various races of the second universe, there were more than 10 powerful figures who had awakened. However, they did not make it public and had been dormant in the Alliance of 10,000 Races. Including the 4 mid-stage desolate venerables, they had been dormant in the depths of the Alliance of 10,000 Races. No one knew what they were doing. Jian Yixian was too famous in the void of the fragment of untainted land. Therefore, this time he did not plan to show himself before going to the Alliance of 10,000 Races. Otherwise, it would arouse the vigilance of the 4 old men and cause unforeseen events. But the old pig spirit was a new face in the void of the fragment of untainted land. In addition, his complacent temperament was almost written on his face, which could easily cause a numbing effect. Therefore, Yi Xian decided to let the old pig spirit show himself first to lure the 4 mid-stage desolate venerables of the Alliance of 10,000 Races out. After they showed themselves, he would show himself and use the 9-colored flame sea to trap them. In just one day, the 2 of them had arrived. However, Yi Xian did not show himself. Although he was in the 9th transformation of the 9 changes of the demonic ape, his body was only 10 feet tall. Although he had already fully activated the spiritual source core in his sea of consciousness. Following Yi Xian used the perfect vibration spiritual power secret technique. Not only did his body become invisible, even his aura did not leak out at all. Even if the peak desolate venerables who had the same cultivation level as him used their divine sense to scan, they could not find any trace of him in this state. He had been following behind the old pig spirit. The distance between them was less than 10 million miles. It could be said that he was following the old pig spirit like a shadow. Moreover, he was already prepared to take action at any time. Thus, this ensured that when the 4 mid-stage desolate venerables of the Alliance of 10,000 races appeared, he would immediately take action, trap them in an instant, and then kill them. Whoosh! An extremely sharp sound broke through the air. At this moment, the old pig spirit's invisible body appeared. Originally, he was only 10 feet tall, but now he had expanded to 10 million feet tall in the blink of an eye. Thus, like an extremely fast meteor, he crashed into the star sector where the Alliance of 10,000 races was located and rushed into the depths of the star sector. At the same time, the aura of his cultivation level was no longer hidden and deliberately spread out. However, it was not the peak 9th stage Supreme Desolate Venerable. Instead, it was the 7th stage Supreme Desolate Venerable, which had just entered the late stage Supreme Desolate Venerable. He did not want to scare the 4 old guys into not coming out and become cowards. However, even if it was only the 7th stage Desolate Venerable, it was definitely strong enough for the countless experts of the Alliance of 10,000 races. The moment the old pig spirit's aura spread out, the entire star sector fell silent instantly. Everyone felt this aura and their bodies shook violently. Their expressions changed drastically. Roar! Who is the owner of this star sector? Rushing into the depths of the star sector, the old pig spirit raised his head and roared loudly. He was extremely arrogant and insufferably arrogant, but it gave people an overly impetuous feeling. Grandpa Pig, I rarely pass by this place, but I can't even see a single soul. This is clearly a blatant disregard. Quickly come out and pay your respects. Please remember the domain name of this book. Mobile version of reading website. Chapter 4926. Howl. Who is the owner of this star sector? Grandpa Pig rarely passes by this place, but I can't even see a single soul. This is clearly a blatant disregard. Hurry up and come out to pay your respects. As his body rushed into the depths of the star sector, Old Pig raised his head and roared loudly. His voice was extremely arrogant and insufferably arrogant, but his tone gave people a feeling that he was overly impetuous. However, no matter how impetuous he was still a late-stage 7th-stage Desolate Master. He was extremely powerful. At least, within the Myriad Clan Alliance, there was no one who could match him. Because of this, within the vast star sector of the Myriad Clan Alliance, countless great beings from various clans who heard these few roars trembled and subconsciously shrank their necks. Not to mention the ordinary Universe Knights, Universe Masters, and Universe Supremes, even the dozens of powerful beings from the primordial era, who had just awakened did not intend to show themselves. However, although the powerful beings from the primordial era did not dare to show themselves, the 4 Desolate Masters from the Myriad Clan Alliance did not care at all. These 4 Desolate Masters were from the 4 clans of the slave clans of the Second Universe, namely the Space Rat, Hell Ant, Giant Ferocious, and Evil Slime. All of them were middle-stage Desolate Masters. The weakest one was a 4th-stage Desolate Master, while the strongest one was a 6th-stage Desolate Master. They were only one step away from the late-stage 7th-stage Desolate Master. It could be said that compared to the late-stage 7th-stage Desolate Master, the 6th-stage Desolate Master was not much weaker. At this moment there was only one late-stage Desolate Master who dared to come to the Myriad Clan Alliance, but they had 4 middle-stage Desolate Masters. If they were to really fight, although they could not do anything to the other party could not do anything to them either. In such a situation, if they were to meet in the void of the universe outside, with the current situation of the void fragment of the universe, the 4 Desolate Masters from the Myriad Clan Alliance would most likely not cause any trouble. They would avoid it if they could. At most, they would just be a little aggrieved. However, the current situation was obviously not so. The other party was bullying them, and there was no way for them to avoid it. Coincidentally, during this period of time, the 4 of them had been suppressed by the Tianji clan and the Magic Hall, causing them to feel a little suffocated. Now that they had encountered such a situation, and it was only a late-stage 7th-stage Desolate Master who was acting like a Tianji beast or the Master of the Magic Hall, it was really infuriating them. Therefore, after a simple divine thought communication, the 4 old guys reached a consensus in an instant. Without hesitation, They rushed out from the depths of the star field where they were originally hiding. Furthermore, because they were originally together, the four of them charged out in a row from the depths of the star domain at the same time. Roar! Oh! Get out of here immediately, or I will definitely take care of you. Along with heaven-shaking roars and howls, four enormous figures that were over 50 million kilometers long rushed out from the depths of the Myriad Races Alliance's star field. They were none other than Huang Zun from the Space Rat, Hell Ant, Giant Ferocious and Evil Spirit Slime clans. Due to their anger, the speed of the four people was extremely fast. They were like lightning flashing across the void. In the blink of an eye, they had already arrived in the central region of the Alliance of 10,000 Races. They were only a few billion miles away from the old pig. For a desolate master-level existence, this was not a distance at all. They could even directly attack and fight from a distance. Shio! At this moment, a sudden change occurred. Hundreds of millions of miles behind the old pig, in the originally empty void, an undetectable 9-colored light suddenly appeared. Its speed was faster than lightning, and in the blink of an eye, it had already shot out, crossing 10 billion miles, and arrived behind the four desolate masters. Walala! Before they could react, this light had already expanded in the wind. In less than half a breath, it had turned into a vast and endless sea of 9-colored flames. It stretched for thousands of miles and directly cut off the space behind and on both sides of the four of them. At the same time, Yixian's figure also appeared hundreds of millions of miles behind the old pig. With a wave of his hand, four rays of light shot out and expanded in the wind, turning into four ferocious mechanical warbeasts with mantis blades on their backs and wings. The four mantis-winged warbeasts were very large in size, 50 million miles long. Their basic form was exactly the same, walking on two legs with mantis wings like blades. There was only a slight difference, and this slight difference was obviously due to the fusion of four different war-class weapons. Now, the four war drums were respectively located in the chests of the four mantis-winged warbeasts that were walking on two legs. And it was because of their integration that the four mantis-winged warbeasts had different patterns on their chests, like emblems. From left to right, the emblems on the chests of the four mantis-winged warbeasts were a purplish-gold void soldier ladle, a weeping soul beast's ferocious head, a gray slime, and a blood-red blood mosquito beast. These four emblems were clearly the characteristics of the four major kinetic races of the four war drums. In the future, they would be the only distinguishing mark of the four mantis-winged warbeasts. And the cultivation level that emanated from the four war drums was, without exception, at the 9th stage of the primordial supreme realm. In other words, they were at the half-step heavenly Tao realm. Phew! Walala! At the same time, the sound of the air tearing apart sounded again. As Yixian appeared in the form of a raging ape, his body instantly expanded. When he reached 100,000 feet in size, he instantly dissipated, transforming into a sea of blood that spread out and enveloped the vast void. Roar! Roar! Screech! Immediately after, from three different directions of this vast sea of blood, there were earth-shattering roars and violent howls. In the midst of the shocking and boundless sea of blood, there were three huge figures that instantly rose from the ground. They were none other than the three demon bodies of the primordial demon ape. One was a body of flesh and blood, which was the cosmic raging ape. The other was a skeleton without any flesh and blood. It was just a purplish-gold skeleton that exuded an endless ferocious aura. It was extremely ferocious. The last was a body of black fog. Although it was also in the form of a raging ape, its body was a shroud of black fog. Even its pair of eyes were only two shrouds of purple light, making it appear extremely strange. In an instant, the three Blood Sea avatars condensed, and the cultivation aura emanating from their bodies were at the 9th stage of the primordial supreme realm. Similarly, they were at the half-step heavenly Tao realm. But this was clearly not all. Everything was not over yet. Roar! You four ants, how dare you challenge your grandpa pig? Do you really think I'm a late-stage 7th-stage desolate supremacy? You are courting death. Awoo! At the same time, the old pig spirit, who had completed the mission of luring the snake out of its hole, also raised his head and let out a heaven-shaking roar. Before he could finish his roar, the cultivation aura emanating from his body suddenly soared. In less than half a breath, He had already risen from the 7th stage to the 9th stage of the Great Perfection. This was also a half-step heavenly Tao realm. From beginning to end it only took 3 breaths of time. 8 powerful peak desolate supremacies suddenly appeared in the Myriad Races Alliance star domain. They traversed the void, filled with murderous intent. Chapter 49:27. Roar. A woo. As the old pig spirit raised his head and let out an earth-shattering roar, the cultivation aura that emanated from his body suddenly soared. In less than half a breath, he had already risen from the 7th step to the 9th step of perfection. He was also a half-step heavenly Tao expert. At this point everything had been revealed. From beginning to end, in just 3 breaths of time, 8 powerful peak desolate supremes suddenly appeared in the Myriad Races Alliance star domain. They traversed the void filled with killing intent. Facing this terrifying scene, the roaring desolate supremes of the space rat, hell ant, giant ferocious, and evil spirit slime were dumbfounded on the spot. Almost as if it was a conditioned reflex, the 4 of them came to an abrupt halt in midair. Originally they wanted to turn around or flee left and right, but the moment they turned around they stopped again. Behind them and to their left and right, a vast and boundless sea of 9-colored flames was rolling and surging towards them. Its momentum was extremely shocking, and the billowing heat waves it emitted made their souls tremble. In fact, when a faint 9-colored light suddenly shot out from the void hundreds of millions of miles behind the old pig demon, the 4 old men's hearts skipped a beat, and they realized that a great disaster was about to befall them. In this void fragment of the primordial world, 9-colored objects had almost become a taboo. This was because the Shenong Sea of Flames in the hands of the Magic Hall Master was so powerful that it made one's hair stand on end, was a 9-colored object. This kind of 9-colored strange flame, not to mention the primordial supreme being and the primordial supreme being, even a true heavenly Tao realm expert would be afraid of it. The 4 of them originally thought that the old pig spirit was just a rogue cultivator who had been in seclusion all this time and had only recently come out. However, when they saw a weak 9-colored light suddenly appear in the void hundreds of millions of miles behind him, the 4 of them realized that today's matter was probably not good. Unfortunately, everything that happened next happened very quickly. Without waiting for them to recover, in the distant void 10 billion miles away in front of them, there were already 8 powerful peak desolate venerables standing in a row. They were filled with murderous intent and were waiting for them to walk into the trap. Huff, walala. At this moment, just as their figures suddenly paused in the void, the 9-colored sea of flames behind them and to their left and right finally met up and merged in the void in front of them. Immediately afterwards, the aura above and below his feet stagnated. When he turned his head to look again, the surroundings were already filled with 9 brilliant colors. In the blink of an eye, the 9-colored sea of flames had turned into a circular fireball with a diameter of 10 billion miles. And now the 4 desolate supremes from the space rat, hell ant, giant ferocious, and evil spirit slime were trapped in this 10 billion mile fireball space sealed by the 9-colored sea of flames. This was clearly the rhythm of closing the door and beating the dog. Furthermore, from the looks of the Magic Hall Master sending out 8 desolate supremacies who were at the peak of the 9th step perfection, the final goal was clearly not just to beat them up and give in. This was a killing move. Their doomsday had arrived. Roar. Screech. Roar. Realizing this, the 4 old fellows were shocked. In fear, they all raised their heads and let out earth-shattering roars and howls. At the same time, their divine senses also spread out and roared in all directions. It sounded like they had a backbone, but in fact they were strong on the outside and weak on the inside. They were clearly trying to be tough. Master of the Magic Hall, are you trying to start a full-scale war between the Heavenly Tao Alliance and the Magic Hall? Now the 3 major forces of the Heavenly Tao Alliance have each set up a directional wormhole in the depths of the star field. Everything that happened here must have been learned by the Friends of the Star Alliance and the Human Race Alliance. They will arrive soon. The Desolate Supremes are difficult to kill. Even if it's 8 against 4, you won't be able to achieve any results in a short period of time. And there's not much time left. Once the Friends of the Star Alliance and the Human Federation arrive, you will no longer have the advantage. At least in terms of numbers, the Desolate Supremes of my Heavenly Tao Alliance far outnumber the 8 Desolate Supremes. Just give up. This battle is destined to have no results. Why do you want to tear apart the face of the Heavenly Tao Alliance and the Magic Hall? Don't forget that the Tianji clan will soon attack again. When that time comes, your magic hall will be the first to bear the brunt. Maintain a good relationship with them. When that time comes, our Heavenly Dao Alliance will be able to help. In short, there's no need to say more about the current situation. The Heavenly Dao Alliance and the Magic Hall will benefit both sides if they cooperate, and will lose both sides if they fight. It's best that you consider carefully. Don't make a mistake. Roar! Roar! At the end of the speech, the 4 desolate supremes from the Space Rat, Hell Ant, Giant Ferocious, and Evil Spirit Slime all raised their heads and roared. They were convinced by themselves and felt that this was the truth. In an instant they felt that their courage was boosted. Walala! Whoosh whoosh whoosh! Just at this moment, a crashing sound came from the fireball opposite them. A crack appeared, but it quickly closed, not giving the 4 old fellows a chance to escape. And in this instant, 8 rays of light rushed out from the tiny crack and entered the interior of the fireball in the blink of an eye. When they abruptly stopped in the void, they were the 8 figures that were lined up in a row in the void far away from the fireball. Now Yixian's 3 Blood Sea clones had shrunk in size and were only 10,000 feet tall. The old pig spirit was the same. Only the 4 heavenly kings, although they had shrunk in size, were still tens of thousands of miles tall, which was extremely eye-catching. 8 against 4. If we were to fight 2 against 1, we might not be able to quickly kill all of you in a short period of time. As soon as his figure appeared, the flesh and blood body of the 3 Blood Sea clones, Violent Ape, had already spoken. A cold light flashed in his eyes, and as he spoke, his gaze swept across the 4 of them. In the end, his gaze landed on the giant ferocious clan's Huang Zun, who had the most clumsy body. After a short pause, he immediately continued. However, this battle was instigated by me. It's true that it's 8 against 4, but whether it's a 2 against 1 battle, or an 8 against 1 battle, killing them one by one, it seems, it's not up to you to decide, right? This was undoubtedly a show of attitude. Even the tactic of 8 against 1 and killing them one by one was mentioned. In an instant, the expressions of the 4 old fellows changed drastically. Their faces turned ashen. Roar! Screech! Screech! A woo! Before they could react, the 3 Blood Sea clones, the 4 heavenly kings, and the old pig spirit, a total of 8 figures, had already moved together. Without the slightest hesitation, the 8 figures turned into rays of light and shot forward at an extremely fast speed. In the blink of an eye, they had already arrived around the giant ferocious clan's Huang Zun. At the same time they spread their arms. Without any fancy moves, they simply... A punch was thrown out. Previous chapter, next chapter, boom! Rumble. At this moment, an earth-shattering rumble of thunder resounded within the fireball. The berserk power was restricted to a limited space, and the berserk will of iron and blood caused one's soul to tremble. Chapter 49-28. Previous chapter, next chapter, boom! Rumble. In an instant, a thunderous rumble resounded within the flame sphere. The berserk power was restricted to a limited space, causing one's soul to tremble. Roar! Screech! A woo! The 3 Blood Sea clones, the 4 heavenly kings, and the old pig spirit, a total of 8 figures, moved at the same time. Without any hesitation, they turned into rays of light and shot out at an extremely fast speed. In the blink of an eye, they had already arrived around the giant ferocious clan's desolate sovereign. Bam! A loud sound shook the heavens. 8 heavy punches, all containing incomparably berserk power, but at this moment they were all directed at the same target. In less than a tenth of a breath, they had already landed on the clumsy body of the giant ferocious clan. Without the slightest bit of suspense, following the loud explosion, the entire body of the desolate sovereign, which was thousands of miles long, turned into a rapidly spreading scarlet mist of blood in the blink of an eye. Whoosh! As the target's body exploded and turned into a bloody mist, Yixian immediately waved his hand. When the faint sound of breaking through the air rang out, an incomparably majestic and invisible force swept out from his body, enveloping a radius of 10,000 miles. The majestic blood mist that had just spread out was all swept up by him, absorbed into his body, and sent to the bottom of the central region volcano in the space of the cauldron. All of this took a long time to describe, but in fact it happened in a breath's time. In just a breath's time, A middle-stage desolate sovereign of the 5th step had already fallen. His body had completely exploded and turned into a bloody mist. Just like that, his body and soul had been destroyed, and not a single strand of hair was left behind. The desolate sovereign was difficult to kill, but that also depended on the situation. Right now, the 4 desolate sovereigns from the 4 clans of Space Mouse, Hell Ant, Giant Ferocious, and Evil Spirit Slime were trapped within the 10 billion mile space formed by the 9-colored sea of flames, unable to escape at all. And they were only middle-stage desolate sovereigns of the 4th to 6th step. If it was 1 against 2 or 1 against 3, they might not be killed in a short period of time, and could at least struggle for some time. But now, 8 peak desolate venerables of 9th rank perfection attacked at the same time. They fully activated the power in their bodies and instantly released it on one of their targets. Such a terrifying attack, even if it was a rank 7 or rank 8 late desolate venerable, there was absolutely no reason for them to take it head-on. He was only a rank 5 middle desolate venerable. It was natural for him to be killed in one hit. And this was clearly just the beginning. Since Yi Xian had come and successfully trapped all 4 of his targets within the 9-colored flame sea's 10 billion kilometer sphere of flames, then the remaining 3 fellows definitely wouldn't let them go. The only result was to kill them all. All of this happened too quickly. The space rat, the hell ant, and the evil slime did not even have time to react. By the time they regained their senses, the desolate Zune from the giant ferocious race had already fallen. At this moment they finally realized the severity of the matter. The master of the magic hall was definitely not a frightening person. This was clearly a thunderous method. Today, it would be difficult for them to escape this calamity. Under the terror in their hearts, the 3 old fellows were thrown into disarray. Panic appeared on their faces, and the aura emanated from their bodies was in chaos. At the same time that they fled in all directions, they even tried to persuade Qianxi, and they were actually still trying to salvage everything. Roar! Screech! Damn it, you actually killed the giant ferocious race? Have you thought of the consequences of doing so? Bao Yuan, to tell you the truth, the giant ferocious race has already moved their entire race here, including the grotto heaven in their race's ancestral ground that has a primordial treasure. Inside, there is still a first-generation ancestor of the giant ferocious race. He was in existence that had already become a peak desolate venerable countless years ago. The purpose of his slumber this time was to break through to the true heavenly Tao realm. Once he knows that you have killed a desolate venerable of the giant ferocious race, this matter will definitely not be let go. There will be no way to resolve it. Don't continue making mistakes. The matter has not reached the point of no return. We are extremely sincere and are willing to facilitate the alliance between the Heavenly Tao Union and the Magic Hall to fight against the Heaven's Legacy race. Therefore, we can pretend that we did not see what happened just now. In the future, we will help you resolve it. Noisy. Hearing these words, Yi Xian's heart stirred, but he did not mind. A cold light flashed in Bao Yuan's eyes as he shouted softly. His gaze swept past the 3 old fellows, and finally landed on the evil slime race's desolate venerable. Whoosh! Swish, swish, swish. There was no need for verbal communication. Just a glance from Yi Xian was enough to explain everything. Almost at the same moment he swept his gaze over. A sharp sound of something tearing through the air rang out. Including Bao Yuan, 8 figures instantly disappeared from where they were. When they reappeared, they were around the evil slime race's desolate venerable. Without saying a word, just like before, they spread out their arms and punched out with all their strength. Bam! The scene was too shocking. Without any suspense, 8 heavy punches that contained violent power were all aimed at the same target. In less than a tenth of a breath, they landed on the evil slime's body. An earth-shattering explosion rang out. The desolate venerable's entire body, which was thousands of miles long, exploded in the blink of an eye, turning into a scarlet blood mist that rapidly spread out. Whoosh! Everything that happened next was already familiar to Bao Yuan. As the target's body exploded and turned into a blood mist, Bao Yuan immediately waved his hand to collect it. A faint sound of something breaking through the air rang out, and an incomparably majestic and invisible force rolled out from his body, enveloping a radius of 10,000 miles. The boundless blood mist that had just spread out was all swept up by him, absorbed into his body, and sent to the bottom of the central region volcano in the cauldron space. This was the second time they had joined forces to attack. Just like before, with just a single punch, a middle-stage desolate venerable's body exploded, and his body and soul were destroyed. As for the 8 half-step heavenly Tao stage existences, they were not injured in the slightest. They did not even pant for a moment. They seemed relaxed and content, as if they had just done something trivial. Such a scene was too terrifying, especially when they realized that the same scene would soon reappear on their bodies. As these thoughts flashed through their minds, the remaining 2 desolate venerables from the Hell Mosquito race and the Space Mouse race began to tremble violently. An indescribable chill was rising from their backs at this moment, after seeing 2 powerful desolate venerables who were not weaker than them die tragically on the spot in just 2 breaths. The last trace of luck in their hearts finally disappeared completely. A terrifying aura of despair was spreading in their hearts. They did not dare to have any more stubbornness. At this moment, the 2 desolate venerables from the Hell Ant race and the Space Mouse race subconsciously turned their heads and exchanged a look. They seemed to have a tacit understanding as they begged for mercy at the same time.